I will now call to order the study session meeting of March 6th, 2023. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Benharamasa.
Here.
Councilmember Long.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo. I see him visually, so
Yeah.
that is present. Okay. Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown will be absent. Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. It's so lovely to see so many smiling faces. Hello. We have 5 items on our study session agenda tonight. The first one is Healthy Kids Beverage Policy. So Becky Smith, our planning manager, is here to introduce the item. Hi.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Leidy, Council. I'm Becky Smith. I'm the planning manager in Planning and Development, and I'm also the staff liaison for the City of North Glen's Healthy Eating Active Living Committee, also known as HEAL, which has participated in this initiative over the last year. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to just hand it over to Adams County Health Department, which will be leading this presentation tonight, and Natalie Salcido. And I'm trying to pull up the presentation. Just do the arrow. It should. Oh, good. Okay.
Me over here. How are you?
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, North Glen City Council members. My name is Natalie Salcido, and I am Adams County Health Department's Community Health Promotion Manager. I am accompanied this evening by my colleague Dana Sobel, who's a Community Policy and Prevention Specialist and subject matter expert in healthy beverage policy. Dana has been working over the last year and a half to engage youth, North Glen residents, and city staff to inform this policy effort we share with you today. We are also accompanied this evening by the North Glen Healthy Eating and Active Living Committee, otherwise known as the HEAL Committee, that was endorsed by North Glen City Council in 2014. We are also accompanied by 3 incredible North Glen youth who are here with us this evening and who are part of the Healthy Beverage Youth Coalition and whose voices we elevate tonight and whose perspective we will hear from this evening. Adams County Health Department opened its doors on January 3rd of this year, as you may know. And Dana and I have had the unique opportunity to join the Health Equity and Strategic Initiatives Division within the Adams County Health Department. We are accompanied this evening by our Division Director, Monica Buleg. And this healthy beverage policy work is housed under this division because Adams County Health Department recognizes this policy as a strategic approach to advancing health equity. I won't spend too much time on this next slide, but it does give you an overview of the presentation we will share with you. I will begin by sharing a quick overview of the proposed healthy beverage ordinance or policy, and then I will walk us through some of the data that informs this policy effort in North Glen. Dana will then join me to share community engagement and outreach efforts that have taken place over the last year and a half in collaboration with the Youth Coalition and HEAL Committee. So important to note on this slide is what this ordinance does do in contrast to what this ordinance does not do. The proposed healthy beverage policy partners with restaurants to ensure that children's bundled meals are offered with a healthy beverage as the default option. And when we say children's bundled meals, we are talking about a meal or entree and beverage sold at one single price. When we're saying healthy beverage, you can see on the screen that we're talking about water with no added natural or artificial sweeteners, or milk non-dairy substitute with no added natural or artificial sweeteners. Research shows that the option listed on a menu is chosen 66% of the time. This policy addresses targeted marketing on children's menus. It is about making the healthy choice the easy choice without taking away any choice. What this ordinance does not do, and I'll just re-emphasize, this proposed ordinance does not prohibit businesses from selling sugary sweet beverages. This ordinance addresses targeted marketing to children and their caregivers. So what does the data tell us about targeted marketing? What we know is that the sugary sweetened beverage industry has a long history of targeted marketing efforts in communities of color, namely Black, Latino, Latina populations. And this targeted marketing has increased over time. You'll notice the bar graph on the left depicts the alarming difference in marketing to Black teens versus their white counterparts, with Black teens seeing more than twice as many ads as their white counterparts. The pie chart on the right shows the industry's investments in Spanish language television. Companies spent $84 million to advertise sugary drinks on Spanish language TV, an increase of 80% from 2010 to 2018. This has furthered health disparities among Latino, Latina, Latina populations. The next couple of slides will depict maps that were developed in collaboration with the Adams County Health Department Data and Epidemiology team. These maps provide a visual of the built environment in Northglenn. And in this first map, before speaking to the data or what the map shows, I'd like to draw your attention to the legend for a quick overview. You'll notice the child care centers are in the red buildings, all child care centers in Northglenn, or licensed child care centers in Northglenn. And the green fork and knife are Northglenn restaurants that would be impacted by this policy. And when we say impacted, we mean that they currently serve children's bundled meals with an unhealthy beverage option. I do want to be clear that we are not talking about financial impact on these Northglenn restaurants. We are talking about restaurants that currently serve children's bundled meals, and through this policy effort would be required to make the default option a healthy beverage. Dana will speak later in the presentation about the impact and make it clear that this is not financial impact that we are talking about to the city of Northglenn or to restaurants. So what does this map tell us? You'll notice around the child care centers and restaurants, there's a half-a-mile buffer. And every child care center in Northglenn, almost every child care center in Northglenn is within a half a mile from a restaurant that currently offers a children's bundled meal with an unhealthy beverage option. For some point of reference, that's the walking distance from where we are tonight to the shopping center just, north of here, with Panera Bread, Cafe Rio, Bad Daddy's, and other restaurants that currently offer children's bundled meals with an unhealthy beverage option. Decades of research support the strong association between the physical environment and an increase in obesity and other weight-related chronic conditions. Environmental factors can support or impede the ability to make healthy choices, and research has shown that individual changes are improved when environments support healthy food options and healthy beverage options. Black and Latino children under 2 consume on average more sugary drinks than white children under 2 and are twice as likely to experience what we describe as too much weight for health, otherwise known as obesity. This is no accident, and we know that the industry's targeted marketing tactics have contributed to this disparate health outcome. In Northglenn, the average obesity prevalence, or too much weight for health, among care-seeking youth ages 12 to 17 is 20%. So what do we mean by that? This is not a general population estimate. This is an estimate for youth who have sought care in Northglenn between the ages of 12 and 17. This does not include youth who have too much weight for health and have not sought care. And we see in the map on the left that in Ward 4, you'll notice the darker shaded regions, and unfortunately, I think the red circles were moved somewhere in translation, but the red circle should be around the cluster that you see on 104th where all the restaurants are established. So in Ward 4, you'll notice the darker shaded regions have a higher prevalence of too much weight for health, ranging from 22 to 24% prevalence in the area below 104th Avenue. This is also where we see the greatest cluster of restaurants that serve a children's bundled meal with an unhealthy beverage option. The other big cluster, as the map depicts, is on 120th Avenue near Wards 2 and 3. Ward 3 shows a higher than average prevalence rate of 23%. The map on the right shows the same cluster of restaurants on 104th and 120th. And on 104th, you'll notice that these restaurants are located in areas with the highest percentage of Spanish-speaking individuals ages 5+. What we know from both maps, side by side, is that where there is a higher prevalence of too much weight for health among care-seeking youth, there is also the highest percentage of Spanish-speaking communities. This cluster of restaurants, mostly chain options, that serve children's bundled meals with an unhealthy beverage, is part of the built environment of these youth and Spanish-speaking communities. I welcome any questions about this data at the end of our presentation and would now like to invite Dana Sobel to join us and share the community engagement and outreach conducted over the past year and a half in collaboration with the Youth Coalition and HEAL Committee.
Good evening. It's nice to see some of you again. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. So some of the more fun stuff in terms of community engagement. Since January 2022, the North Glen Healthy Eating Active Living Committee and several other Adams County agencies, in addition to a Healthy Beverage Youth Coalition, have been engaged in this work. I won't say too much about them because they're both going to speak later. But in terms of community events, we did education, outreach, and disseminated a community survey for the better part of last year. Some places where we performed outreach were the Teddy Bear Picnic, North Glen Preschool, North Glen Day Camp, and Good Shepherd Food Bank. We engaged students in several problem-based learning panels for both the North Glen Middle Schools and the North Glen High Schools to engage youth. And in partnership with the American Heart Association, we hosted a free community event at the Rec Center where we had a free dinner, and we had agencies set up booths to educate families and provide resources for families in North Glen. And then lastly, we disseminated a community survey, which I'm going to go into detail about on this next slide. So we created a survey to kind of gauge residents' knowledge, beliefs, and attitudes about sugary beverage consumption and access in North Glen. We had almost 250 families take this survey. 196 were completed in English, and 51 were completed in Spanish. One of the last questions on the survey was, as you can see up here, I would support requiring restaurants to offer milk, water, or an unsweetened milk alternative as the beverage that automatically comes with a kid's meal, knowing that a sugary drink, like soda, could still be ordered if a family chooses. You can see from these results here that 85% of respondents strongly agree or agree to require restaurants to offer a healthy beverage option up front. I would like to note that 90% of respondents were residents, work in North Glen, or visit the city often. In addition, 90% of respondents are parents, guardians, or provide care for children under the age of 12. So a bit about restaurant outreach and engagement. Health department staff made in-person visits during July, October, and November of 2022. If a restaurant owner or manager was not available, then educational materials were left with contact information included. For feedback from the in-person visits that were made, most chain restaurant owners or managers communicated to us that they are not the decision maker and cannot alter menus in any way. This is really a corporate decision. So some examples of owners that I spoke to or managers that I spoke to are Perry's Pizza or Black Eyed Peas or Bad Daddy's Burgers. They all communicated to me that while they are not the decision maker, so they are unable to change the menu. In October 2022, we held 4 informational Zoom sessions for owners and managers to attend. This was promoted by both the Health Department and the North Glen Economic Development Department. And lastly, but noteworthy, a privately owned restaurant, the Glen Bar and Grill, is what we would consider a restaurant champion. So they have fully endorsed this initiative. And I'm just gonna read this quote from Cale Glasser, who's one of the managers at the restaurant. "We are so excited to support this ordinance from both a business and a health perspective. From a business perspective, this will decrease beverage waste, and we found that it will be more cost-effective, actually saving us money. From a health perspective, we are excited to be known as an establishment that promotes choices for families and offers healthy options for kids in the city." And now I'd like to ask the Youth Coalition to share some of the work that they have done and why they feel that this policy is important.
So I'm Elizabeth. I go to Mountain Range High School and I'm a senior.
And I'm Isaiah. I am a senior at Horizon High School. Together, we're going to present a few of the things and activities that we as a group did. Starting off, we have Elizabeth.
So we did create coloring and activity books for youth and gave them to different early education centers, pediatricians, and dentist office across North Glen to kind of engage them in different activities about healthy beverages.
We also attended certain libraries and we hosted booths outside of and gathered surveys to collect intel about how much the community would be interested and engage in our policy.
And then we also provided dinner to members of the North Glen community at the rec center with different health organizations, which was followed by the movie Fed Up.
We went to summer camp at preschool hosted by the North Glen Recreation Center to educate kids about the different risks associated with unhealthy drinking.
And then at Derby Day, we also did some outreach. We hosted a booth at the day to reach out to community members and host a survey on who would be interested in passing the policy and their dining habits across North Glen.
And finally, we hosted a meal with the North Glen Youth Commission and gathered a few more members to join our crew and to talk about the epidemic that is target marketing in Mexico and how kids have a lot higher access to sugary beverages and the dangers that come with that.
Hi, I'm Mira. I'm on the Youth Coalition. I'm a sophomore at Legacy High School, and I'm currently president of the North Glen Youth Commission.
Hi, my name is Nazli Sufiani. I also go to Legacy High School. I'm a sophomore, and I am the secretary of the North Glen Youth Commission.
So first, we want to start off with some of the health impacts of sugary beverages. So long-term consumption of sugary beverages can increase your risk of life-threatening illnesses and diseases. So by limiting this from a young age, North Glen can help prevent these detrimental outcomes in the future.
As far as demographic goes, we learned that 45.7% of North Glen residents come from Black or Latino backgrounds. These residents are actually more prone to targeted advertising and long-term health effects such as diabetes and heart problems.
And the government plays a vital role in promoting the safety of community members. And so by passing this bill and promoting a healthy living, it is protecting the longevity of North Glen residents and people who visit the city.
Thank you for listening to the work that we've done so far and why we feel that this is important. Now we'd like to invite the North Glen Healthy Eating Active Living Committee to speak about their involvement with this work.
Good evening, council members. My name is Erin Harris. I'm a resident member of the HEAL Committee, and I live in Ward 1. I'd like to thank you all for having us and listening to our presentation today, and thank the other HEAL members that are here in support. The HEAL Committee was formed in 2015 and is made up of both residents and city staff members who work together to identify policy areas and programs that promote positive health within the community. Since its formation in 2015, it has made a number of accomplishments that can be seen on this list. A few to note are the completed food access assessment, and we currently host bike rodeos to help do bike education for young people within the community so they can ride safely. When the HEAL community was engaged in this with the Healthy Beverage Partnership in 2022, The committee decided to support this work because it aligns with the mission of promoting health within the community. Limiting marketing of sugar-sweetened beverages to children can lead to less consumption, which will promote better long-term health outcomes. And we know that the frequent consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages is associated with type 2 diabetes, heart diseases, non-alcoholic liver disease, tooth decay, and other chronic diseases that can have a large economic impact by reducing productivity, life expectancy, and increasing disability and healthcare costs. If an ordinance moves forward, the HEAL Committee will be supportive of it. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand it back over to Dana.
So in addition to having community support and restaurant support, this initiative also has lots of local, regional, and national support. So we have tons of folks here tonight, so I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who showed up and who's been working on this over the last year and a half. Some examples of local support that we have are the Glen Bar and Grill, Fit Theorem, and the HEAL Committee. We also have support of Adams County agencies and health clinics like the Early Childhood Partnership of Adams County, Clinic of Family Health, and Kind Dentistry. And then lastly, we have the support and a very strong partnership with the American Heart Association. So we realize that this might be new to some folks, but this policy strategy has actually been around for over a decade. So the first policy like this was passed in 2010 in Santa Clara and San Francisco. And then in 2019, California went on to pass this at the state level. Locally, and as part of a regional partnership, we've passed policies in Lafayette, Longmont, and Golden. And I'm happy to share that these policies that have been passed locally have all been implemented successfully in full partnership with health departments, city government, and restaurant owners. So here we have policy recommendations. So the first is the model policy, which Natalie went over earlier, and it really includes beverages without added sugar or artificial sweeteners. And the reason that this is the model policy is that this policy makes the healthy choice the easy choice. It does not prohibit businesses from selling products, and customers are still able to order any beverage that they desire. No choice is being taken away. Second, we have a model policy that is inclusive of 100% fruit juice and all the beverages that I previously mentioned. The reason we've labeled this kind of proceed with caution is that the American Academy of Pediatric Research indicates that drinking too much juice can contribute to childhood weight for health, the development of cavities, and other stomach complications. We would recommend a 6-ounce size for juice boxes if choosing this option. And then lastly, we have voluntary policies. The Adams County Health Department does not support this approach, as there is no research or data to suggest that businesses, in Northglen's case, mostly chain restaurants, have successfully implemented this policy voluntarily. Permitting restaurants to opt in to a voluntary program creates more opportunity for inequities and inconsistent default options. Additionally, the health department cannot support this pathway with the same education, training, outreach, and funding available in response to the 2 model policy options that we do recommend. So just a quick snapshot of the impact in the city. There are 18 restaurants that serve bundled kids' meals, so 18 locations would be impacted if the model policy were passed. If council decided to include juice, then this ordinance would impact 17 locations. We have broken out the policy that has been impacted by ward, so you can see that Ward 4 would have the highest number of impacted restaurants, followed by Ward 3. And then lastly, we have a draft compliance assistance pathway. So the first step would be that the health department would check menus at a routine restaurant inspection. This is done at every restaurant today, regardless of this policy. All menus are checked. So if a restaurant was not in compliance, then the health department would provide education, outreach, and necessary materials to get this restaurant into a compliance. If a restaurant did not comply after a certain number of days, like 60 days or 90 days, for example, then a warning letter or fine could be issued. This is determined by the city. The fine could be as low as $25. I want to note that there have been 0 recorded fines to restaurants in Colorado since this passed in 2017. The goal of this is not to fine restaurants. The goal of this is to create a partnership with restaurants and make this shift seamless, easy, and offer healthy choices. And most importantly, the health department has resources to offer restaurants if this should pass. We have funds for menu reprinting, we have the capacity to train and educate restaurant staff, and we can provide public relations opportunities. This is not a cost to the city or to the restaurants. This is kind of the important piece of the puzzle that the health department is really taking on all of this work and all of this training. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and we're excited to hear what questions you all have.
Okay. Anyone want to go first? Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, you had the list of some cities in Colorado that have passed this. You know, have you approached, let's see, our neighboring communities, Thornton and Westminster? Are they considering something like this? I mean, I'm just kind of trying to hold in my mind if we do it and nobody else around us is doing it, how that might affect our restaurants.
Sure. So currently we work kind of one city by one city. So North Glen, it was a really kind of, the partnership made sense initially because of the Healthy Eating Active Living Committee and some other connections that we had where people had approached us about this policy effort. So that was kind of why we started to work in North Glen.
Okay, and then I guess my next question is, I know it says that there will be funds for menu reprinting. I'm just wondering, like, how complicated is that process? Are some people going to be like, you know, this is too confusing or this takes too long?
Sure. So there are 2 privately owned restaurants that have bundled kids' meals. So I've approached both of them and asked for quotes to see how much it would cost, but neither restaurant has provided me with that. A lot of the chain restaurants, the corporate office will cover the cost for the menu reprinting.
Okay.
But yeah, we are definitely working to try to get cost estimates to help with
Okay.
the reprinting.
All right, well, that's good to know that it's really only 2 privately owned or whatever, smaller chains, smaller restaurants. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
Thank you. I'd just like to ask a clarifying question on the back of Councilmember Goff. Let's say a corporate restaurant decides to decline to reprint these menus. Will Adams County cover 100% to reprint menus?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess where I'm struggling, and I'm looking at the language in the ordinance from Longmont. So if you have a violator, are you fining the corporation? Are you fining the restaurant manager? Who exactly is going to be cited?
Sure. So we would kind of work in a tiered approach. So if someone from the health department came and saw that the menu was not in compliance, then the first thing that we would do is that we would go and educate this restaurant. And we would work with them to see, what do you need to get into compliance? How much time might you need? How much funding might you need for menu reprinting? So that would be the first step. A fine wouldn't be the first step. Then after a certain number of days, we would go back and reassess, looking at the menu to see, what does the menu look like now? And after that point, I guess that maybe after the 3rd time, then that's when a fine could be given, and I believe it would be going to the restaurant. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. I guess, you know, it causes me to think, as I listen to all of this and your answer, you know, why approach this with a stick as opposed to maybe having a carrot or more of an incentive sort of program to get companies to come on board, as opposed to relying on a punitive, sort of potential punitive threat. Excuse me.
Appreciate the question. And I think, you know, the city, of course, would be the ones to put the ordinance together and the pathway of compliance. I think what we're recommending and what we've seen in the research is that a voluntary opt-in program is not sufficient to move this type of effort forward. And I think the stick that you're referencing, Councilmember Kondo, is really the last resort for any outlying restaurants that don't come into compliance with a very low risk, no financial burden policy effort like this. I think we recognize that policies need to have some kind of teeth, some kind of stick. But as Dana mentioned earlier, there's been no record of any one of these policy efforts resulting in a fine to a business. I think the health department has been able to bring folks into compliance through supporting changes in menus, as well as training staff who would be offering the kids' meals. So I guess to culminate, the carrot really is, the technical assistance, the sort of grace period, right? That the North Glen City Council could make decisions about what that looks like. Could be an ordinance that's pushed out to give us time to educate staff, educate restaurant owners, educate corporations about what the policy is and what the policy is not.
I don't know if this is exactly what
Okay, thank you for-
Councilmember Kondo was referring to, but could we go back to slide 38 or page 38? I don't know which slide it is. It says restaurant outreach and support. So one of the wonderings I had, you mentioned the Zoom session, but what wasn't stated but is typed is that no restaurants attended. So my concern there is that we already have a lack of interest from the restaurants. And the chain restaurant component is a question I have. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. Yes, sorry, I was trying to go back to the slide, but I was.
The
I was
pages
not
probably
able
don't
to.
match. I don't know. It's 38 on my slide, but
Yeah, so I think that we promoted this in partnership with the Economic Development Office because we felt like if I was emailing, it might not be as received as if they knew the Economic Development Office. So we promoted it together. And what we found was nobody showed up. So I guess that from my perspective, how I view it is that if owners or managers were really upset by this ordinance, I have given them contact information, I have given them educational information, and then we hosted these Zoom sessions in conjunction with North Glen City Office. So if they were upset by it, then somebody would have come and somebody would have said something. So I don't necessarily take no attendance as a negative. I actually see it as a positive.
so can you speak to the chain restaurant piece? Because I'm a little
Yes.
worried about that.
Can you
and
repeat the question?
So I guess we could use Perry's as an example. If the North Glen location, what happens if they just say no? The fine just goes to the one location, or? I'm trying to figure out how to manage the chain restaurant if they're not interested.
If they're not interested in
Because
abiding by the
if we don't
ordinance?
have, because you had mentioned you went there, and they're like, we don't make decisions, right? So it's a corporate level decision. And then if no restaurants attended the Zoom meetings, they may not be participating because they're a chain restaurant and they're like, doesn't matter, there's too many of us, this isn't gonna apply to us. So instead, I guess the opposite could be presumed, right? You're saying they have no questions, they're not worried. It could also be, that's not gonna apply to us, we're not engaging.
Well, actually, I would say that chain restaurants are actually very familiar with this because,
Okay.
like I had said, it passed in full states in California. So
Right.
if all corporate offices know that there's a huge push for this initiative, the National Restaurant Association, they know about this work and this is nationwide. So chain restaurants and corporates are very familiar with these types of initiatives and these policies that are passing. Generally, actually, they have a separate menu for local policies who have passed. So, for example, like in Longmont and Golden, there are several chains that overlap with chain restaurants in North Glen. So these managers or owners are already going to be familiar with this because they're already having to change their menus or had to change their menus in Longmont and Golden.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still a wondering, but, I mean, the notes I took as you were presenting this is probably the most thorough presentation I've seen from this seat. I'm not even kidding. As far as letters from the community, I mean, really, it has so many pieces. Like the homework that was done, the preparedness is, I mean, it's amazing. The only thing that I worry about is how we're going to enforce it. And I would really hope that we could make an Adams County decision with our neighbors, because I think that's just a wondering I have. So anyway, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions here. Out of the businesses that are on board in Lafayette, Longmont, and Golden, which of the standards they choose? Do you have that information? Like, did they do the full gold or
The
proceed
full
with-
motto policy, they do
All
not,
of them?
not include juice. That is correct.
Do you know how many businesses total were in those, roughly?
13?
That's okay if you don't know. I know that's
There's
a big
19
ask.
in Golden
19? Okay. That's good.
and Longmont. There's someone here who can maybe help me out a little bit
Is
later.
the Google assistant? Okay, that's good to know. And then 0 fines for those businesses in those cities. I think overall, like, what has been the response from those cities in terms of like feedback from their businesses? I can't find it here. I'm trying to scroll, but I thought I saw, referencing what the mayor had said about corporate businesses. I thought I saw somewhere that there were some corporate-owned businesses that are included in these cities already. Like, I thought Bad Daddy's was one of them. And, just curious to kind of piggyback on that. If there's no fines, then it seems like there are some corporate businesses that have been transitioned, okay? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think that the goal is that the health department works really closely with these locations that have bundled kids meals to ensure that they understand what this policy is and get an idea of the time that it would take for businesses to become in compliance. So I think because there haven't been fines because the partnerships have been very strong, because the health departments have really put their best foot forward to make those strong partnerships. So the other examples in other cities, they've just never gotten to that point because they didn't need to. And that's what we would hope to do as well.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I think the partnership piece is key. I understand where this is coming from. I mean, my background is in fitness and nutrition, and the amount of kids with obesity is scary at a young age. So I commend you for, and the kids, the Youth Commission, for taking charge and doing this and really working hard to get the information out there, because it is an epidemic and the amount of type 2 diabetes is scary. I have concerns, as other council members have voiced, just on how that would be enforced and what that would look like. But like the premise of it, I support.
Can you go down one more slide? There we go. So the number, North Glen restaurants, the number that have children's meals is 18, but the restaurant impacted is 23. Do you know where the 5 are?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think this was just an older version of a presentation. Ward 4 is still the highest, and Ward 3 is still the second highest. But it is, Ward 1 is 2, Ward 2 is also 2, Ward 3 is 5 locations, and Ward 4 is 9.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Got it.
the trend is still the same, where Ward 3 and 4 are still the highest, which makes sense given the maps that we saw earlier.
Any other council members want to weigh in or have questions? Councilmember Long?
My question comes to you in terms of all the other cities that may have participated across the country. Are there any measurements of outcomes other than anecdotal statements that might have been made? And I'll follow up by saying, you mentioned epidemiology. You have some epidemiologists around, and you've studied the demographics of the communities. I'm just wondering how you would measure a successful outcome. When would it be good? A reduction in diabetes, a reduction in the use of hemodialysis centers? I mean, how do you begin to measure it? I know this is a difficult question to answer. I'm just putting it out there, just as a...
No, I welcome that. So we know that what is listed on the menu, people choose 66% of the time. So if a healthy beverage is listed, 66% of the time, that's what a family will be ordering. So we know that if you're ordering that majority of the time, that over time, you are going to decrease negative health outcomes. In terms of tracking health outcomes for children today, that is a much larger question, and I think that that's something that we're hoping to make one small step in. So we know that daily choices can have an influence on health outcomes. So if we can help intervene in some positive way in a child's life, then over time, that will then help them in their overall health. But tracking would be. Oh, yeah, please.
If you don't mind me also just adding that we do know that reducing sugary consumption long-term will reduce these health outcomes. And we know that there are disparate health outcomes. We know that there are communities that experience much greater rate, as we expressed earlier. And health outcomes do take a long time to reduce. And so, this is one policy piece to the puzzle. There are many more strategies, of course. This is the one we are proposing tonight and would welcome other opportunities to discuss other measures. But any way that we can reduce sugary consumption is a strategic approach to addressing diabetes and type 2 diabetes and obesity in young people and long term.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also am in agreement with Councilmember Lukman Massa to work in life sciences. I am acutely aware and understand the problem with diabetes and the epidemic and challenges economically it presents to our country. I'm looking at slide 40, and it seems to me you're missing really a major stakeholder here on that graphic. You got the circle, you got the health impact, the demographics, government responsibility, but shouldn't there be individual responsibility as well? Because really what you're saying is you want to make this option available, but ultimately the success is going to be determined by whether people do choose that option. And I think that is the component where you have to account for individual choice. So I wonder if you can talk to that point.
So it was a little tough to hear, but I think I heard some of the question. If I don't speak to it, please, let me know. But we know that 66% of the time, folks choose what's on the menu, right? And so if we can change the way in which the menu is marketed, we can change in which the way people make choices, right? It is an individual choice, but this policy effort is not about taking any choice away from the individual. It's about making the healthy choice the easy one, right? It's about permitting folks, and again, research shows 66% of the time folks will choose that default choice. So they will choose that healthy option, or they will choose the unhealthy option, right? And so it is individual choice, but it's also the environment in which the individual functions, lives, works, and plays, right? And so that is why we chose to show that map with the child care centers, because it does speak to where children are working, living, or where people are working, living, and playing, and where children are playing, right? And a half a mile distance is a very short walking distance where folks are accessing children's bundled meals, right? Caregivers are accessing children's bundled meals for their children. And so if we can make that default choice the healthy choice, we're moving in the right direction is what we believe.
So follow up on that. Hopefully I'm a little bit clearer. I'm going to get closer to the phone. So if we're talking about really putting policies in place that defines how a restaurant proprietor is communicating marketing, and I wish Corey would be here. I see him in the seat, but does that start to impinge on free speech?
I guess I can't speak to that. Again, I think what we would argue is that targeted marketing is the responsibility of our government to address targeted marketing, especially when we know that the industry has had a history of targeted marketing in specific populations that they know are that they know consume at higher rates. With that, I welcome Dana if you want to speak on this or.
I just haven't thought about it in that way. I think that there's going to be something listed on the menu. So if we can provide families with healthier options, that's amazing. But I don't see it as infringing on free speech.
Great, thank you. I want to thank you for coming and for an extremely thorough presentation. I'm going to direct council to the memo, the very first page. So if you go down, there's some budget implications and a staff recommendation. If we would like, we can have staff bring us back a draft ordinance and we can continue this conversation and vote on it at that time. Yeah, okay. So a draft ordinance, and we just really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. This has just been the culmination of so much work, and thanks for listening to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, our next item is the 2023 update to the sustainability plan. Becky Smith is here with the Sustainability Committee. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Mayor Lighty, Council. I'm Becky Smith, as you guys know from before. I'm also the staff liaison to the city's Sustainability Committee. And I'm joined here tonight by Renata Triswalty, who's our Sustainability Committee Chair. And we're just going to go over the proposed updates to the Sustainability Plan. It was originally adopted in 2018. So let me actually get to the plan. Sorry. So tonight we'll be presenting the proposed revisions to this plan. Most of the amendments are minor, but there is a significant revision, which includes a 10th goal area that we'll go over later in this presentation. Through this process, we did work with different city departments and divisions on the existing goal areas from the 2018 adopted plan because we needed to know, are those goals working? Are the indicators working? How are the targets? Are they something you can track? And got a lot of feedback from different departments. And so part of the presentation tonight will just be going over some of those recommended changes from those other departments. We'll also be giving some updates on what we think is progress that has been made since we adopted the 2018 plan. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Renata to talk about the vision in the plan.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and honored council members. It is great to be here again, and we are happy to present you with our recommendation based on our vote from last year, the priorities of the Sustainability Committee. The vision of that we have about Northglenn is a vibrant community that thrives on civic engagement and collaboration to use the power of our citizens to increase sustainability and enhance our resources and economic sustainability. The definition of the sustainability itself could be found on the second paragraph, where we creatively and thoughtfully utilize our resources, showing pride in our community to meet our present and future generations' needs without compromising the ecosystem on which we depend in order to create an exceptional quality of life for every generation. And with that, in the 2018, we already had a sustainability plan. It consists of 9 goal areas, namely arts, culture, and events, sustainability, economy, human dignity, transportation, open space and land use, housing, resource conservation, community education and civic engagement, environment, and public health. About the Sustainability Committee itself, it was formed in March of 2021 to act as an advisory committee for implementing the sustainability plan by providing recommendations on priorities, programs, and sustainability initiatives within the city. The committee consists of residents and stakeholders. the committee is bringing forward a recommendation to amend the 2018 Sustainability Plan to include a 10th goal area that is climate action. And the main reason that we recommend this, this goal area is to move forward with our vision about Northglenn. And we hope that in the future, after we implement this, this new action goal, we could address the biggest challenge of the communities at the present, that is climate change. And the staff has provided updates and progress towards the 9 areas. The 10th goal area addresses goals, indicators, and targets directly related to human activities that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. The models that the state of Colorado goals with modifications, we use the greenhouse gases inventory report in 2018, and we use that. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean in 2019, and we use that instead of the state's goals in 2005. I would like to highlight that due to energy savings and renewable energy actions that city residents, businesses, and government have taken, over 7,349 metric tons CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions were avoided since 2017. This is equivalent to the emissions associated with 1,583 gas-powered vehicles driven for 1 year. And this was achieved before the climate action goal was adopted. So we think that Northglenn has a big potential to implement and adopt climate action goal. And this was one of the evidence. I would hand back to Becky.
Right. So now I'm just going to go over quickly some of the revisions to the existing sustainability plan. In working with our event staff on the arts, culture, and events section, we have added a sentence to the target regarding waste that the city will strive to meet waste reduction goals at city events. And this is really because some events, it doesn't make sense to hire additional help with waste goals. At some events, it doesn't always work to put out extra facilities for different types of waste. So we didn't want to commit to something that doesn't make sense for the city at every single event. We also revised the target that aimed to increase attendance at city events to instead focus on the quality of the event and make sure that we're meeting city council's strategic goals. We don't need events to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger if they're meeting our target audience. And then we have several achievements in this area to highlight, which include with the development of the new theater, there has been expanded programming. They're on track to increase participation by 10% by 2030. And they've reported that the programming, or our city events staff has reported that programming at city events has gone up as well as attendance. So for sustainable economy, in working with the economic development staff, we did decide to remove the goal to become a smart city, as well as remove the percentages and years associated with the targets. They had several achievements to report as it relates to sustainable economy, including that in 2021, 80 new businesses opened, almost 100 businesses participated in the Excel Energy programs to conserve energy since we adopted our energy action plan in 2020. 359 businesses received grants in 2020 for pandemic relief that added up to over $1.2 million. And over $23 million is being invested at the marketplace by Prost, and they're working to become one of the most sustainable breweries I heard in the world, but I don't know that I can verify that, but I've heard that they are really striving for that. Okay, there we go. The next area is human dignity, and the Sustainability Committee identified environmental justice as a missing component in this goal area, and really wanted to add goals, indicators, and targets as they were related to the city's diversity, inclusivity, and social equity efforts. We're planning to attend a DICE meeting, I believe, in April to discuss this plan and brainstorm ways that we can work together to achieve these goals. In addition, some notable achievements as it relates to human dignity include the creation of the city's crisis response unit in 2021, the development of the new North Glen Recreation Senior Center and Parsons Theater as an amenity for our community, and increased drop-in rates at the new rec center. We didn't have any revisions to any of the goals, indicators, or targets for transportation, but we do have some achievements to report. We have several residents that are lower income participating in the Smart Commute e-bike program, and several of them are utilizing the Healthy Eating Active Living Committee's scholarships to participate in that program to remove that barrier of $250 for participation. The city has also installed 35 bike racks in parks and city properties that were received through an Adams County Open Space grant, I believe. This was a few years ago, but we've already installed 35. We also had a program where we had applications where businesses could apply for those bike racks as well. And the city has installed 6.41 miles of on-street bike lanes and sharrows. Again, open space didn't have any revisions to the goals. Just some notable things that have been accomplished since adoption of the plan. We did adopt the Unified Development Ordinance, which has mixed-use zone districts as a tool that we can utilize now. And as you guys know, development of the Civic Center has started, and we're now on phase 2, starting to talk about phase 3, so that's really exciting. Oops. For the housing section, we did update the indicators and targets to be in line with the housing assessment that we recently completed. And that is also in line with the comprehensive plan that is moving forward for adoption at this time. And so there are a couple new targets and indicators that are aligned with that. Some of the achievements for this area that have been accomplished over the years, in the new Unified Development Ordinance, we do allow now accessory dwelling units in all single-family properties, so that can increase housing options. Again, the mixed-use zoning districts as a tool in the Unified Development Ordinance. There's more diversity in our housing stock thanks to the development of Carl's Farm. And we did receive the grant to conduct that housing needs assessment and complete that, and we're still working with the consultants on how to implement some of those recommendations. For resource conservation, working with our Water Resources Division, we decided to remove the target that was related to reducing the use of non-potable water by 15%. By 2021, and this is because the only place in the city that non-potable water is used is Northwest Open Space, and it's really, the amount of water used is dependent on our seasonal weather events and what's happening. So it just doesn't make sense to have a target that is so weather dependent, and also only pertains to one location in the city. We also changed the waste diversion target to only address residential diversion because we have no way right now to track commercial or multifamily diversion. If at some point we do start tracking it, we can always update this goal. And we revised the target related to city spending identified as sustainable. And that's because it was a target that had a date of 2020, and we actually pushed it out a little further just to work towards that goal a little longer. In resource conservation, we do have several achievements to report. Potable water use has dropped by 7% since 2018. We had 231 commercial businesses and 2,600 plus residential homes participate in energy efficiency projects since 2017. And then the city also worked on improvements in our buildings that resulted in over 500,000 kilowatts of energy savings. And our residential waste diversion continues to hover around 12-13%. Under the community education and civic engagement, we just again updated the targets to push it out. Obviously, we don't want targets that had a date of 2020 when we're now in 2023, which is kind of crazy. I almost said 2022. And we have made progress in this area just through communication. So we've worked a lot with the communications division that has been great at getting our information out about our energy action plan, the EV readiness plan, any sustainability program that we're working on. They've really helped us to get that out in the connection, social media. We also have had city staff at a lot of the events promoting energy action plan items, participating in the home energy squad visits, so we've reached a lot of residents that way as well. Oh, and we formed a sustainability committee in 2021. So, and this is the last goal area, and this is public health and environment. And really what we did here was we just reworked some of the goals under the first goal that relates to promoting healthier environments and protecting health. We consolidated the sub-bullets to just state that we want to reduce hazardous chemical use by residents, businesses, and city operations, and support the use of green or natural cleaners, pesticides, and fertilizers to reduce the impact to air, soil, and water. We did add a goal to this area that includes basically addressing or meeting the needs of those experiencing hardship and or if they're unhoused. We changed the indicators a little bit to, instead of just saying tracking hazardous spills, we will track illicit or illegal spills and dumping actions in the city, because that is something that we can track. And some of the progress that we made include that we installed 2 air quality monitoring stations, and our residents can check that information anytime by going to a link on our website and see what the particulate matter is in the air. The city has formed a DICE board, as you know, and created the crisis response unit as well. And I believe that is it for the updates to the plan. This is like a kind of fast and furious overview. But before we get to the questions, I just want to pass it back to Renata for an update on the Sustainability Committee's priorities for 2023, as well as some events that they're working on planning that are coming up.
Mayor and council members, this year we have another priority to be promoted, and it's the solid waste optimization. We are working on studying more about the how we could optimize the solid waste, how we can find a solution for this issue. And the second one is we are putting together sustainability forums in May, on May 4th and the 23rd. The ideas for these sustainability forums is, one, it's going to be a public engagement and outreach opportunity to increase the awareness of the Northglenn residents about the climate change, as well as other challenges that will threaten their quality of life. And the second one, it's going to be a starting point of a talk and discussions to capture the public's aspirations, opinions, and ideas. The third one, it's going to be an opportunity for us to connect and learn together with other communities in Colorado, as well as the outside of the United States. Those are the updates that I could provide you. Thank you.
All right, so I will turn it to you for questions.
Perfect. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 2 questions. First of all, going back to slide 41, I just seem to recall that when we toured, when Councilmember Yarmo and I toured the wastewater treatment plant, I thought that some of our treated effluent was actually being used as water for a local wheat farmer. So I'm just trying to figuring out if that water should also could potentially be accounted for as water that's diverted non-potable, because it seems like that's a pretty significant quantity of water.
Yeah, that's a good point. I am not sure if that was considered when I got this information, so I can check into that and find out
Okay.
more prior to bringing back the plan.
Okay, great. Then my second question, it sounds like we want to add a 10th goal, a climate related. And so it begs the question, how do you reconcile that with goal number 9, which is currently titled Public Health and Environment? Are you going to parse out environment and combine it into your climate action goal number 10?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how you're going to deconflict that? Because it seems like you got two similar buckets, at least when I look at the naming of the buckets.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of overlap throughout this plan. The climate action goal is really focused on carbon emissions more than all aspects of environment, which is when we originally did this plan, we didn't have a greenhouse gas inventory of our community. And so we stayed away from creating any sort of climate action goal because we didn't even know what our emissions were. After we adopted this plan, we did go and do a citywide as well as a city operations greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And so now we have that baseline, which is what the climate action goals are really trying to address and move the needle on, if that helps. But you're right, there is overlap throughout this plan.
Councilmember Kondo, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you. I was just going to say it's all about what's in a name. For your general awareness, DRCOG actually approved this past fall a 2050 master plan for greenhouse gas reduction. Obviously, it serves the greater Denver metro area, but that may be something that you might want to flip through just to get a sense of what's happening from an infrastructure perspective as to how the Denver region is lowering its greenhouse gas emissions. Maybe it might give you some food for thought as you're trying to put more meat on the bones.
Yes, we'll look at that.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I was just going to say, I was going to question something about the climate action, because from what you just now said, it's more like addressing air quality, but will there be in the future, I mean, are you leaving it as climate action because we might extend it to something else in the future, or?
Sorry, I missed the.
Well, I guess the question is, because you're not calling it air quality, you're calling it climate action, does that mean in the future there's potential to add more than just greenhouse gases to it? Is that?
I would say that this is a living document and can be amended throughout time as seen appropriate, for sure. With the climate action, it is addressing air quality, but emissions are also what are contributing to the warming climate. So it's really looking at how to lower the risk for more extreme weather events that we'll see. Extreme heat and drought, as well as extreme wind, are some of the greatest risks that Colorado will have. There's a few others too, but.
Okay, and then the only other comment I really wanted to make, really more than a question, is just that I don't know what you call it, brochure, the little booklet that you included in here is just amazing. All kinds of data and information, and I'm glad that, you kind of pulled stuff out to make it a little more manageable, but very impressive.
Thank you.
I had a question about the smart city goal that was removed with the percentage in years. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so our economic development department didn't want that goal in a sustainable economy. The city is still a member of the Smart Cities Alliance, but we haven't participated heavily throughout the alliance over the last few years. Mostly, there just hasn't been a lot of staff capacity to participate. But it is something we could look into, or it's something we could add back into the plan if it's something you're interested in. I agree with economic development that it may not just be sustainable economy where it fits, because a lot of the smart city solutions also address detention or stuff regarding transportation, or it's really, there's a lot of components to smart cities. And so maybe it needs to be added back, but maybe it doesn't fit in that area. So I would leave that to you guys to let us know what you would rather see.
And I was looking, I couldn't find the previous percentages and targets. Can you give me an example of one?
The old plan.
Oh, thanks.
The targets in the previous plan were increase the number of businesses participating in sustainability programs by 10% by 2020, and then increase economic opportunities for entrepreneurs and small businesses by 5% by 2025. And I think they felt like with their BRE, and I'm speaking on their behalf, so if I say something wrong, I apologize. I think with their BRE efforts, they felt like they really are hitting a lot of the businesses, and they didn't want to limit it to the 5%. And also that a lot of the business opportunities are variable based on turnover that's occurring in businesses and different aspects of the economy and what they're really trying to target. So they feel like they have more flexibility if we remove those like numbers that they're not necessarily tracking. My understanding.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yep.
Well, a couple of things from me. I wanted to thank Renata. Well done. It's lovely to have you, and I appreciated your presentation. And just to, I had the opportunity to hear the Vice President speak today, and her whole focus was on climate action, so it definitely resonated. So I think adding a 10th target is a great idea. Or a 10th goal, not target. So, thank you. I don't see any other hands. Oh, Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question goes to the back page of your intro here on the budget, time, and implications. You say there are no financial or time implications currently set forth. However, the plan will guide budget and funding decisions for city projects into the future. My question is, how does that happen? Are you in the budget process? Are you meeting with all the departments as they go forward and you?
So I wish I could be with everybody to talk about what they're doing all the time. So it is a little bit department by department and what they put into their budget request. And so some of it will be when you guys go through your budget conversations is thinking, oh, does this also align with these other goals of the city? When we're coming up with the planning budget and working with the sustainability committee, we would present our budget through Brooks Svoboda, the planning director, or a budget request if there was a project specific to these things that they wanted to work on. And then you guys would see that through your budgeting process, and you would decide if it's something that you would wanna, that you feel is important for the city to take on. So.
Follow-up, may I?
Yeah.
Part of the critique would be a critique. If there's a hole in their mitt and it isn't quite right, and you got a better idea for them, you feel like you have the wherewithal to, using a big word here, inculcate and put your own thoughts into the process? Possibly. I'm not trying to interfere with the process of the city staff, but I'm just thinking out loud here how you might interface. I'm assuming you have a good staff relationship with all departments. I'm just thinking out loud here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I do work with a lot of the departments. I work a lot with Public Works. Right now, working with Rob Weber on looking at fleet electric vehicle replacement plan, which I think you'll be hearing about. And so there are opportunities where I do try to remove some of the hole in the mitt. However, I'm also the planning manager, so I've also have some other priorities as well, so.
Well, thank you.
That's all we have. Thank you so much. Oh, Councilmember Guyer.
I feel like we can probably add a bit more to, in response to Councilmember Long's question. The goal with having a sustainability coordinator, do you want to talk about that piece, Becky, in relationship to really being that hub for the city, which is a piece that is missing right now?
So it is in the 2023 budget later this year to look at hiring a sustainability coordinator. And the idea for that position would be that they do work more directly with each department, trying to look at what projects are in their pipeline and how they could make those more sustainable projects. And more of a twofold too, where a project could stand up maybe better to the test of time and some of the more extreme weather that we will probably experience, as well as there's some financial benefits to doing some of this as far as reducing our energy consumption or offsetting it in the long term. So ideally, that person will have that expertise that I don't necessarily have, and can help have those conversations with those departments. And so thank you, Heather, for bringing that up.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Okay, third item, Fleet Electrification Advisory Program. Rob Weber, Public Works Operations Manager, is here. Hey, Rob.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Hope you're doing well. So this is a great segue into what Becky was talking about. We work together a lot on a lot of these different things, and FEEP is one example of working with planning, Becky, with sustainability and where we're going with a lot of these projects that we're working on. So the background on this, about a year ago, we reached out to a company based on Xcel Energy's information with Sawatch Labs to contract with them to do a study on our vehicles, or representation of all of our vehicles in our fleet. And we did that over, I think it ended up being about 4 or 5 months worth of testing. There's one of the things I want to explain, there's 2 different reports in here and they're kind of redundant. And the reason is that when they did the initial report, there were 27 vehicles that they provided GPS on and 23 that we did. They forgot to do the ones that we had our GPS on. So when I was looking at the data, I was like, I think we're short some vehicles here. So they went back, pulled that data, and it took them a little while to crunch the numbers and get all that in. Just wanted to let you know that. So basically, we wanted to do a feasibility analysis on our current fleet and what we do with our vehicles and how we're going to transition into either EVs or plug-in EVs, which are hybrids, or are there vehicles out there that we have to use gasoline or diesel at this point? And there's still quite a few of those out there, as you'll see. So we contracted with Sawatch Labs, and it was really a neutral cost to the city. It was $23,116 to do the study. But upon completion, Xcel Energy reimbursed that through a grant back to the city to pay for that. So that was nice that we got all this data basically for free. So the study basically focused on the metrics of how we use our vehicles, how long they're in one place, where they park, how often they drive, how many miles they cover, how often are they idling, those type of things, so that we could really get a clear picture of what they call as an EV suitability score. So if it makes sense to transition a gas or diesel powered vehicle to an electric vehicle or to a plug-in electric vehicle or hybrid. And I'll use EV in those terms probably interchangeably, so I mean both when I'm talking about it. So we monitored 50 vehicles. We had 23 that we had our GPS, 27 that they had, or 27 that they had. The different departments that we looked at were neighborhood services, streets, parks, public works, utilities, engineering, and the police department. We studied these, I think they did 3 months, I'm trying to remember, it was 3 or 4 months where they took that data over a period of time so that we could kind of get an idea of what we were looking at. And the types of vehicles that they looked at were light duty vehicles, and that really is more small hybrid cars, small SUVs, and I would say nothing bigger than like an F-150 pickup truck. Those would be considered light duty. Anything over that, medium duty, heavy duty, if you're familiar with trucks, an F-250, F-350, F-450, some stake bed trucks, things like that would be considered more heavy duty, along with like trash trucks and the things that normally people would think as heavy duty. We looked at several police vehicles, half-ton pickups, which I believe are the 250s, and some SUVs that we already have in the city's fleet. Right now, what they came back with, there were 46 vehicles. If you extrapolate out the 50 vehicles, they identified out of that 46 vehicles that they felt were ripe for change when it's time to change them. So we do a rating system with all of our vehicles to evaluate age, whether or not they're obsolete, how much are they costing us to maintain, what their fuel mileage is, what it is the cost to drive them, total cost to drive it. So like an example would be a trash truck that might cost, when we get it brand new, might be $3 to drive it every mile. Within 5 to 7 years, that price might be $6 because of age and wear and tear on transmission and all the different things that go wrong with those things over time. So we look at it that way, and then we give it a ranking to determine when we want to ask for Jason to give us money in capital money so that we can replace vehicles throughout the whole city. So when we looked at that, the vehicles that they identified as replacements were, they said that there were 46 total based on what, of the 50 that we looked at, 46 in the entire fleet that we could possibly replace over the next 3 to 5 years, 7 years out, depending on availability. So the models that we were going to buy this year that we actually wanted to be on a waiting list for, we had here is 3 Lightning pickup trucks that we were going to put into use with parks, a Ford Escape hybrid for the Park Ranger, the crew crisis response unit, they were also going to get a Ford Escape, wastewater treatment plant, a Ford Maverick, which is an electric vehicle, and then 5 Pursuit vehicle hybrids that are on order, and I think they're already in. If I talked to Jim the other day, I think those are already in, and they're probably getting the lights and all those kind of things on it. And then the planning department ordered a Chevy Volt that's on order as well, but we don't have it yet. So once we have all these listed vehicles replaced, not those, but the 46, once those are all replaced with EVs or hybrid or whatever the recommendation is, we anticipate that we would have a total greenhouse gas emissions reduction of over 10,235,000 pounds. And then a total cost of ownership saving, depending on the vehicle, because some last 7 years, some 10, some maybe 12 or 13, of about $587,000 on that capital cost, replacing those vehicles. And just so you know, those totals are based on assumptions that Sawatch Labs has used in their data from all the studies that they've done that include fuel price, electricity rates, greenhouse gas emissions from the electricity production, service life, maintenance cost per mile, and insurance. They're based on only the end user and the electricity to produce, to charge them. They do not include the production of the minerals or mining or any of those things. So that is not calculated into it. So just so you know, it's not a 100% clear picture of what it's doing with the environment. So the other thing they looked at was, where are the most efficient locations to put the EV charging stations? And as you'll see, they only really listed 3, but we know that in the future we will need 2 additional ones, one at wastewater and one at the water plant. But right now we're looking at maintenance and operations, the Justice Center, New City Hall, I believe have some already put in there, but they're really for public use, and these are really just for city vehicles so that we can charge them overnight. They wouldn't really be available to the public unless we could pull them up to a fence or something and do some type of a split where they could charge. But that would take some thinking on how we do that and where we would locate them at, and would we still have our vehicles being safe and being able to charge. So with that, then the budget time. So based on the rating system that I was talking about, as we go through this, we'll look at each vehicle, and I do this every year. We look at each vehicle, the fleet mechanics, they rate the vehicles, and then we look at that rating. And currently, I think when a vehicle gets to about a 13 is when we feel like we really need to replace it. It was later, but it was a little earlier in their lifespan, but we've been able to move it. I think things have gotten better in the production of these vehicles. They last a little bit longer. Some of the materials last longer in these vehicles, with the exception of maybe trash trucks and loaders and things like that that are used extensively for heavy work. So what we want to do is over the next 7 to 10 years is to look at that schedule of all of our vehicles and put into that, basically it's a pro forma of when would we replace whatever vehicle it is. Say it's a trash truck and we bought it in 2019. We look at trying to replace trash trucks about every 5 years. So that would go out at 2024. I don't know if there's anything out there to replace that, but if there was, we would say, if available, electric vehicle or some type of vehicle that we could replace that with, as opposed to a diesel that's running. So we're continuing to work on that plan right now to look at the entire fleet as to what vehicles would be available, when can we replace them, and when would they fall in line with the capital replacement cycle. So based on that, our recommendation is that one of the things that we really feel we need to do first is get the infrastructure in place. And right now, I know that Becky's been working with Xcel Energy to try to get grants for that. And some of it will probably have to self-fund. But we really need to identify with Xcel Energy is what we'll be doing next, is to identify where are the locations, do we have enough power, do we need to upgrade power, those kind of things, and how long will the vehicles have to be there, those types of things, so we know we're putting them in the right place. So that's what we're working on now. And then the other one is, because the availability of these vehicles is so limited right now, the vehicles that I had listed before that we were asking for this year, we would like to go ahead and start moving forward buying them, even though they're still gasoline or diesel powered vehicles, because otherwise we're gonna get so far behind. Some of these vehicles are starting to cost us more money to operate than if we would change them out. So we're looking for that as well. So I wanna go through just a little bit of the data in the back of this. So if you look at the suitability assessment, the fleet impact, the estimated lifetime impact, the 18 EVs, is total cost of ownership would reduce by 7%. Operational costs, $197,000. Now that's just the 18, that's not the 46. So when you multiply that out, that's the $587,000 number that was on the other page. And 30% reduction in GHG emissions on the 18 candidates they suggested, and a reduction of 40,790 gallons of fuel on just those 18 vehicles. And if you go to the next page, the suitability assessment, that gives the asset ID that we have, what the vehicle was they looked at, and what the recommendation would be for that replacement, and the overall EV score. And all these scores of these 18 were like at 100 or better. And then if you turn to the next page, that's the actual suitability assessment and recommended replacement. It shows you a little bit more data. It shows the address of where the longest time that it spent in one place. There's one on here that doesn't make any sense, but I believe it was because we had one of our trash trucks that was down for a period of time down at the recycle center, and it was sitting there for a while. So if you see the one at 52nd in Denver, that's not our location. That's just where it was sitting for about a week until we could get it back up there, because it broke down. So then you can see the charge time and cost, what they're looking at as far as what they think that daily cost will be for these vehicles. And then each of these other pages is each individual vehicle that we listed in here in the 18. And then at the back of the study, it goes over the EV results kind of more of a summary way. And then the next steps that we have are, if I can find them, the next steps are we submit an intake form with Xcel Energy. Then we explore all the dashboards and scenarios, put that together into our Asset Works program, which is how we manage our timing for vehicles and rate the system based on the work that we do on all of those. And then we look at the replacement schedule and the recommendations of all those. And then if we need help with Sawatch Labs, they're still available to help us do that. So then the other thing that's not on here that we need to do is really do the assessment for the EV charging stations, and we're starting to work on that right now. So I also attached the battery warranty at the back, and that just shows you the battery warranty for each of the providers that show you how long those batteries are warranted for in each of those vehicles. So I know that was a lot of quick and down and dirty stuff, so any questions you have, I'll try to answer them. If I need help, I'll ask Becky.
Questions for Rob? Councilmember Long?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm assuming that you're gonna be training the mechanics and they're gonna go
Absolutely.
special skills to be developed and all that coming on
Yeah,
board as well?
I've talked to Xcel. I'm actually going to be going to a EV conference at the end of this month to learn a lot about those things. But one of the things about EVs that I really like is that the reduction of mechanical systems in it, because it's not an engine, it's a battery, and it's just a motor, it's electric motor versus that. So a lot of it's different, but they are a little more dangerous to work on because of the voltage in the vehicles. And so we will want to send our mechanics to school to make sure that they're learning this. And there are a number of places like Lincoln Tech, Front Range Community College that are offering these classes. So we'll send them to make sure that they get certified to work on these prior to having them working on it.
Would there be a follow-up then in your maintenance facilities to accommodate these new vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things is the vehicles that we parked outside, the charging stations, where they go. We'll have to be a little bit more organized in how we're doing that because these vehicles will have to have certain spots where they park. And we've been trying to do that, but it's been a long time of things out there where people just kind of park where they want to at M&O because it's such a big wide open space. But we are going to have to develop a parking plan to do that. And then also, how do we work on these vehicles versus the gas-powered vehicles? I think we have enough bays out there right now that we could convert one if we needed to for electric, so that equipment would be available for us as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rob, good seeing you. First of all, the analysis, clearly the more expensive component in an EV or electrical car is the batteries. So did they take into account that life cycle cost in what might be a standard life cycle for an EV vehicle? I'm assuming you're thinking at your service life. Is that all accounted for?
They did, Rich. They put they figured the life cycle based on what information they have to date. A lot of the EVs haven't been around a lot, and some of the newer ones, there's really a limited data on some of those, but they've tried to extrapolate what they've learned from that environment and put that into the study. And so I'm hoping that they're going to give us updates as we go along too, and we can request that if they get more information. One of the things that I found interesting in this is that some of the vehicles that they recommend may not be applicable for some of the work that we do. And I'll give you an example. The F-150 Lightning right now, because of the location of the batteries, you cannot put like ladder racks or connect things to the bed of the truck because the batteries are located under it. And so I know that when I talked to Ford last week with Siltahar, they said that they're trying to reconfigure those more for the fleet and government side instead of the general public. Because general public typically won't put like a hoist or anything in the back of it or something like that. So they have to identify how they're going to reprogram these vehicles so they can use the batteries, but you can also put the equipment on necessary to do those type of jobs.
Understand. Thank you. And just a comment, public embarrassment for you, but thank you for coming out. I think it was about 3 weeks ago after one of the major snowstorms. I know you were out there in your truck breaking up some ice personally. And it certainly sets a strong impression with me that I wanted to say something here in the public forum. So thank you for getting out there and leading in front.
I guess I do.
Yeah, Councilmember Goff.
I've been thinking about this, and maybe you don't know, but we've had to push some purchases into the future because of lack of availability.
Yes.
Is that going to happen again next year?
Right now, I don't have a lot of confidence right now on the EV hybrid side. What I found out from Siltahar when I talked to him last week is that even our gas and diesel vehicles won't be able to be ordered until the end of summer, which is like August. And the reason is because the plants are so far behind because of the chip shortage they had and all the issues with supply chain that they're trying to supply the private sector because that's where they make their most money. You know, the fleet and government, we get big discounts on vehicles, so they're pushing it to try to get it out into the private sector. So I was really surprised. They said they were 0 allocation this year for fleet and government for Siltahar, Spradley, and for O'Mara.
I was kind of afraid that would be something like that for the
But I'm hoping that they'll get caught up. But this year they said that their allotment was already done and they wouldn't be able to order until 2024s were out in August. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, special events 2022 recap and 2023 plans. Our Director of Communications, Diana Wilson, is here to present.
City Council, Mayor, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. I believe I have a presentation, right? Joanna, is it up? Do I just hit?
Yeah, if you just, all right. Yep.
There we go. All right, so I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about what happened with events in 2022 and what's going on with 2023. So the purpose, like I just said, was to tell you what's going on. This is specifically events that are under the communications department. So we run certain ones. I don't want to get confused with, rec has events and PD has events and planning has events, and we support a lot of them, obviously on the communication side, but on the event side as well. So just want to specify we are talking about ours. And direction needed this evening is I have a July 4th finale options that we'll need to talk about. I did want to do a little bit of an overview, so we're going to talk about the history, 2022 event attendance, what influenced what we're doing in 2023, the plans, July 4th, and then a little bit about events planning in the future. I thought some history would be beneficial. I know it's beneficial to me. I've only been here 3.5 years, and I know some of you have been here a little bit longer, but we have some new faces. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how things kind of evolved. Long-time tradition in City of North Glen. Nobody remembers when we didn't have a 4th of July event or Noel North Glen. So a big tradition here. The large regional events, so I'm talking about Pirate Fest, Food Truck Carnival, and at that time it was Magic Fest, actually were spurred by council request about 9 years ago. And that's when we added the special events staff. And then there's been additions and changes. So, we put neighborhood parks in there during COVID and have kept that. Festival Lawn got built. COVID, we did a bunch of small things. Magic Fest, because of budget during COVID as well, went away. So kind of a variety, it evolves like anything else. Last year, those are the events that we had. And then event staff in the communications department, we have 13 events in this year. And I did want to mention a little bit that we're not an island, right? There's 6 of us in the department. So we obviously don't run these events by ourselves. So I really wanted to recognize for every event that we have, that's going to be citywide, whether it's ours or another department. You're talking about PD, you're talking about Public Works, you're talking about Parks, you're talking about rec staff, you're talking about other department staff, not really volunteering their time, but working non-traditional hours to come support events and execute them. So just a lot of players at the table, so I didn't want to make sure and recognize them. And we will very soon be fully staffed. So if you haven't heard, thanks to you approving our structure, we now have 2 event specialists, Ashley Garst, and soon Marisa Phillips will be on board. She officially starts a week from today. I kind of stole her from economic development, but she was really interested and very excited, and I think she'll be great. So we're happy that we were able to offer her some professional growth within the city. We also have Terry, who helped us doing really clerical type of stuff last year, but we saw that she also had a lot of potential. So when we changed our seasonal events assistant position to a full, it's still part-time, but it's all year round, she jumped into that. So we'll very soon have a full team, so I'm pretty excited. Attendance. So Derby Days used to be later in the year. We moved it to April by recommendation of Colorado Parks and Wildlife because that's when they stock the fish and kids have a better chance of catching fish. So we moved the date to the end of April by their recommendation. If you attended last year, really a fun event. It might be a little cool, but families come out, people have a good time. It's sure 275 are like the kids that participate. Obviously, they all come with family members. I'm sure there's a few that walk over on their own, but usually they have their whole family there. So that's what we got for Derby Days last year. Food Truck Carnival, 60,000. That might be a little conservative, but our estimates are based on sales and traffic and the kind of things that we get a percentage off of the sales. So I didn't want to overestimate. Thanks to economic development, we'll have a better measurement tool this year to really get a good idea of how many people came. We actually used it for last year's count of Noel. Bubble Fest brought in 3,000 people, which was great, except we weren't expecting that. So it was pretty hard on the turf, a little big for the site. July 4th, a little bit lower attendance than some years and went great until the very end, as you're well aware. Dancing Through the Decades was a first-time event for us, really a nice event. A good attendance, good theme, people had a good time. I was pleasantly surprised that people came out to dance to a DJ and dressed like 80s, and you could see from some of the pictures up there, it was pretty fun. Pirate Fest does well, just like Pirate Fest has always done well. That event continues to grow and did last year. And then Noel Northglenn is up this year, and I used the economic development tool of doing spot counts to come up with that estimate. So we know it's pretty accurate. It's just funny because we used the whole rec center. It didn't feel anywhere near as crowded as last year, and actually we were up. So kind of interesting. And some nice feedback on the added, that we used the whole rec center, that it wasn't as crowded, and that we added more elements that were more inclusive. So some nice feedback there. Because of what happened in 2022 and input from all of you, thank you so much for filling out that survey in November. These are the adjustments that we're making. So Bubble Fest was really too big for the festival area, and we don't have a good alternate site that would provide the resources that they need. So that's going to go away. That was a contract agreement anyway, and they weren't super happy that we billed their insurance to replace our turf. Because we, of course, they had come and told us it wasn't going to hurt our turf. And yeah, it did a lot. Desire to bring back the Pride event, so we swapped out Bubble Fest for Pride in June. Good timing on that. State of the City, we did have the mayor's evening event at the festival grounds last year. This will be like the super duper version, right? We got that 80s band coming already. I know. Like I said, the council survey results kind of influenced what we were doing. So we've now rebranded our Groove Grub and Local Gov, see why we changed the name, to Neighborhood Nights. That's a lot easier to say. Neighborhood Nights, yay. And then Newell, like I said, the new aspects were positive. People liked them, had good attendance and participation. There are some things that will change up next year to hopefully increase that interaction. And had some feedback that the groups that we're trying to be inclusive of didn't care that it was called Noel Northglenn. They're perfectly happy to be there and tell you about their heritage. So the feedback was like, you know, Noel Northglenn's a pretty good tradition. Just stick with it. People know what it is, and we're happy to tell them about, you know, whether that's Hanukkah or, you know, the other of things that we had there. I did want to give you a little bit of feedback on Groove Grub and Local Gov, which is now going to be Neighborhood Nights. These were kind of modeled after combining a band in your local park and your ward meeting, right? You're all familiar with that. And we have estimated attendance. We did hand out council coupons. We were kind of all over the place on the coupons. Like when we started with Ward 1, we're like, you can have one per family. And then we get towards the end and we're like, you could all have one. Go get an ice cream. So the cost impact of having the coupons, basically, we spent less on it than we do for feeding people at your ward meetings. So the cost impact really wasn't very high. So we would like to return and do that again. And honestly, we should go on the generous side because it's worth it. And people like it, and you have a chance to interact with people. I have to be honest, I was a little disappointed with the attendance. I was hoping we'd get over 100 people at all of these events. I'm hoping that the rebranding will make a difference. So just a little recap of, we rebranded. We're also marketing it as a series. It'll be on some of our bus stop signs. That's how we'll market it on our big digital signs and also in all of our listings. And we're going to do a poster this year that gets put up along with Food Truck Carnival posters with the band that's coming and what kind of band it is. We're going to reduce the food trucks and encourage people to bring a picnic and then also give the coupons. So even if you brought a picnic, but the coupons still be worth it because you could go get ice cream or something, right? And then we evaluated the park sites. So Ward 1 and Ward 3 are changing this year. Ward 3 at EB Rains will definitely draw more people just because there's always more people at EB Rains. And Ward 1 moving over to Fox Hollow because we've done it at Larson a few times. So, no, I said Fox Hollow, Fox Run, sorry about that. And we are keeping 5 for this year, but we really do need to reevaluate in 2024. If our attendance doesn't increase, we probably should reduce this to, instead of having 5 events, to 3 events. We do 1 on each side of the highway and then, of course, the 1 in the middle. So just kind of what we're looking at and trying to keep tabs on so that we utilize our resources well and reach as many people as we can. There's Neighborhood Nights. There's our new look. Ooh. So that's the Spring Summer Activity Guide page. That's already gone to print. And we're using that Neighborhood Nights kind of look on all of our stuff. Here's our event schedule for 2023. So Derby Days, just around the corner, Food Truck Carnival. will be exciting while we're having construction on the site. We've had a few meetings with the construction guys already. Neighborhood Nights, Ward 1, we're going to have the City Hall groundbreaking. Pride Night, Neighborhood Nights, Ward 2, we did get, we already have 4 committee members to work on Pride for here. Then we have July 4th, State of the City, and then the other events. So that's just a recap of what's going on for 2023. Which brings me to 4th of July finale. So we issued an RFP to get some bids on doing, it's a high enough amount that we have to do bids for an RFP. We usually just put that on BidNet, which is Rocky Mountain, all the governments puts their RFPs out there. We also put it on our city website, and I have to be honest with you, I was a little nervous about it, apparently for good reason, and sent a lot of direct emails saying, hey, we'd really like you to apply for this. We got truthfully, we only got 2 responses, but then somebody else sent me something, and I'm like, sure, we'll take it late. So we got 3 total responses to the RFP. For fireworks, same company that Northglenn has used for about 20 years. And then their prices are there, 13-minute show, $59,000. That's up $9,000 from last year. And then year 2 and year 3, I asked for, in the RFP, I asked for, hey, if you were going further out, how much more would it cost? And then Hire You AV Pro Drone Show. They go from 100 to 300 zones, from 40K to 95. And then Open Sky, same thing, basically, but they only go up to 150. I was surprised. I thought drones would be a lower price. On a non-big holiday, they're a little lower, and fireworks aren't that much lower because a lot of the fireworks cost is your operators and your actual product. So that is what we received. And I won't read all of this to you, but I just wanted to let you know who we reached out to and kind of what the feedback was. So Zambelli is the only one I was able to talk to in person. They actually apologized for not letting us know that they couldn't bid on RFP and basically said, we don't have enough operators. And every single fireworks thing said, hiring operators, training operators. So operators are a big issue. I feel like someone under, like one's website wasn't up anymore, so probably a victim of COVID. So staffing, and then Zambelli said straight up, if you would have sent us the RFP the day after 4th of July, I still don't know if we would have bid. We just don't have the people, and adding somebody on the 4th of July, it's just, we're not looking for new customers on the 4th of July. So that was a little tough to hear. And then, like I said, Western Display, is it Western? One of the Western and J&M, like they're here. They're like in Colorado and wouldn't even pick up their phone, wouldn't answer my emails. So kind of a bummer. But that's what happened with the RFP for July 4th. Before I go to closing thoughts, this really is open to you and discussion and what you guys are thinking. I did actually get another idea from our sound and stage and light person who said they do light shows, laser shows, so it would be an outdoor laser show is another option, a drone show, and fireworks. So those are kind of our 3 options for a finale for July 4th. The laser show, he actually said himself, it's not fireworks, but it is a nice entertainment for a crowd. It is significantly cheaper, like $15,000. So pretty economical if we ever have budget cuts was my thought. But seriously, I wish I had some great, like, hey, this is the home run out of the park of what we should do. And there really isn't one. It's, do you want to try something new? It really isn't that much more economical. Do we want to go with fireworks with a company that we've used for years, despite what happened last year? The RFP did change. It's not launching off of the lake. Everything would be off of the ground. So our layout for 4th of July would be different. Probably the whole east side grassy area. The fireworks actually would probably just use right next to the lake. They aren't that big, but drones would be bigger. So it'd take a pretty good chunk of real estate. Not that we have a ton of people on that side of the lake anyway. Most people are around on the other side by the stage, but that would be an impact. So it's tough. It's a tough choice, or lack of choices, I guess probably is a better way to put that. But need your feedback so that we know how to move forward with this year.
Great. Councilmember Walker?
Ms. Diana, thank
Yes.
you, Madam Mayor. in the past, were the firework contracts 2 years, correct?
Yeah, what we do is we do 1 year with an option to renew for up to 3 years. So if one party or the other isn't happy, you can get out. So we really do 1-year contracts with an option to renew without doing RFPs again.
Okay, and I was curious, in their RFP, or their proposal back to you, why their costs went up so significantly for year 2 and year 3?
Yeah, it's labor and getting product from China.
Okay.
And they expect that to continue to go up, hence the out years going up.
All right, thank you so much.
Can you remind me, so I'm looking at the fireworks. Do we
Yeah.
typically do a 13-minute show?
Yeah, they usually do between 10 and 15 minutes. Can I go backwards? It's
Okay,
not
and
going
is,
backwards.
you should be able
is that what we've paid in the past, was the 59?
50, the last contract that we did, which was executed in 2018, I'm trying to, because they gave us the same price, even though we skipped 2 years because of COVID. It was 50,000 and they gave us the same for 3 years.
Okay, I just knew there was a lengthy discussion about what to do with this year, if we extend it, if we double it, and I think we wanted to extend it.
You didn't come to a consensus, I have to be honest with you.
Okay.
But that was one of the ideas, to offer a longer show. And I'm sure that they would accommodate that. Most fireworks companies don't go over 15 minutes for the size of the audience that we have. I mean, like Disneyland, I guess, probably would, but that's a pretty big customer, right? But if we wanted it to be longer, you just add on product cost.
Are
Labor
these
doesn't
their
have to-
prices for 4th of July? Are they the same for other times of year?
No, they're cheaper for other times of years.
Because I know if we didn't come to consensus, it might be interesting to go back to that and figure out what we did discuss, because I do remember a lot of options, including adding a show to another event.
Yes. So if you do a show, whether it's drones or fireworks, you typically aren't paying as much. Fireworks doesn't go down as much because they still have labor operators and product, but they're paying premium labor on a holiday when everybody's doing fireworks show. So I'm sure there probably could be some negotiation there if we wanted to do it on a different day or at a different event. Usually in the contract for fireworks, and it would be the same for drones, if there's inclement weather, it's really windy, you can't put on your show, we have specifications in the contract on what we'll do. In the past, the specifications have been, if it's weather, we do it the next day, period. There's like no negotiation there. Last year, there was an opportunity to negotiate that because the show actually failed. It wasn't the cause of the weather that we're aware of.
Oh, I've never seen a drone show. Do you have any video of that, or?
There is video of them. If you go to Hire UAV Pro or Open Sky, there's drone show. The picture, let me show, I'll go back one. So that flag on the right, that's what drones look like. And the biggest difference that I think with drones would be, takes up more real estate. They generally throw around like at least the size of a tennis court is the kind of space that they need to set them up. They are better for the environment because they're not obviously fire, but they're directional. So you need to make sure that your audience is looking the direction of the way that the patterns are going. So you see that flag, we're looking at it straight on. If you are a distance away and to the side, it's not going to look like a flag, right? So they are very directional. You still do them to music. It's still kind of the same length of show, just there aren't explosions. It's designs in the sky of all these drones moving around. And they do, like they'd probably be able to do a Northglenn N, for example. You know, they'll make it patriotic looking in different shapes and they fly around. So they're cool. Just really depends on what you like. Parker used one last year. I believe it was Parker.
Yeah.
Somewhere down south used it last year, and now this year they're going to do a hybrid of some fireworks and some drones.
Was there resident feedback?
I think there was probably resident feedback, and personally I knew a couple people that were down there, and one was like, it was really cool, but it's not fireworks. Somebody else was like, I liked it better, it's not loud. You know, the noise is always issues for some people. So there isn't a mass exodus over to drone shows, that's for sure. People
There's so
like
many
fireworks.
cool
but
options.
It's an option.
Like they can make so many things. Okay.
They really can.
Councilmember Goff.
So, First of all, I was going to say, at the Olympics, they did the drone show. The Super Bowl a few years ago with Madonna, there were drones.
Yeah, I've just never seen one live, so I didn't know.
Anyway, if we're going to consider doing more than one event, which I remember we were trying to, make it up to our residents in some way. Maybe we could do a drone show at something and the fireworks, the 4th of July. I just, because of this continued rising cost of fireworks, that makes me a little uneasy. If we were to commit solely to fireworks, and maybe if we tried out drones and people really like them, then in future years, we could just do that.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the first time I saw a drone show was at the Albuquerque Balloon Festival. And I would say, then could be a factor. I don't know if Diana, if you had conversations with the drone vendors, are there any of the showstoppers? Can they, in theory, fly if it's damp or wet?
Rain is
What potentially could
wind.
cause a drone show to be canceled?
Wind is the big factor for drones. And
Okay.
and it's the same for fireworks. They both are subject to weather.
Yeah.
If it was torrential rain, I don't think there'd been anybody sitting in the park, so I don't know if it would matter, but if there were torrential rain, but the drones can fly in mild rain, but wind is the big factor there.
Follow-up question, do firework companies, do they advertise their carbon emissions or any other particular emissions as a result of their displays?
I don't think I quite got that. I'm sorry, can you say that again, please, Councilmember Kondo?
Do firework vendors advertise their emissions or their greenhouse gas
Not that I'm aware of.
emissions as a result of their displays? Okay, thank you.
I haven't seen any fireworks company say what their environmental impact is, no.
Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since I'm not too familiar with the drone shows, 100 drones versus 300 drones, I know it'd be a bigger show, but just maybe an example of a smaller one versus that. And then also, how does that compare to a 13-minute show? How long is a drone show, or is it just however long you want it to be?
The drone shows are about the same length. I actually put in the RFP, anywhere between 12 and I want to say 20 minutes, but I have to look for sure. So they all kind of, were like, hey, this is for 15 minutes. So it's about the same length of show. And I have to be honest with you, this isn't a technical issue. It's really their experience with audiences. How long do people like to sit around and watch this type of thing? How many designs can we really do? So it's their recommendation of this is probably appropriate for your event and what people, think is great and it doesn't go on too long. For example, for our grand opening, our fireworks show actually was shorter. It was only 8 minutes, and that was their recommendation because it's colder and people don't want to stand outside for that long. So they really were like, you should do a bigger, more stuff happening during those 8 minutes than extending it longer.
Okay, that was going to be my other question, because I remember us talking about the $50,000 or whatever it was, and not so much extending the time, but extending the quality, so more oomph. I'm leaning, as I love the drone show, the only reason I'm leaning a little bit more towards fireworks is because I remember how much it seemed to mean to our residents that they didn't get their fireworks show. And that's, people are steeped in tradition, and for them, it's a tradition and maybe a dying one because it's more old school versus new, with the drones. So I think I would like to see a fireworks show with more oomph, but I love the idea that Councilmember Goff said maybe adding a small drone show. The only concern, of course, is people like to sit, all around. So would some people be missing that? And would that be a point of disappointment, potentially?
So just because I'm not sure all of our newer counselors know this, we budgeted $50,000 for this out of the events budget, which obviously, and all of these are probably over that. I do think I can cover the overages out of our current budget, but if we're gonna add an additional element, it would mean bringing a budget exception. And I know we did get the $50,000 last year, but this is all general fund budget, so it just gets, rolled into everything else. Nothing carries over. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that it's not an enterprise fund or anything. There's no rollover, so it would be a supplemental budget ask if we wanted to add something. And that's not bad or anything. I just want you to be aware.
Yeah, I think it was more of us just wanting to make it up to our residents.
And I totally get that. And I guess it depends on how long you think people's memory is. If we didn't do something, obviously,
long.
people would remember very, very well.
It's long.
Yeah.
We're still getting
Thank you.
questions. Has anyone in this room seen a drone show?
Not live.
Brooke, can you speak to it? Because I'm watching the video and it seems very slow.
Yeah, it takes a while
Is
for them
it
to
just the
fly around.
video or, and this one in particular is rotating.
Yeah.
So I think it could show the image to multiple sides, but the pace is painfully slow.
Sure, I think if you go on YouTube and look up Stranger Things, there's an amazing drone show where they do this entire show where it turns into the creatures of Stranger Things and it's set to music. It's super cool, and I think it's about 200 or 100 drones, and it takes up a large amount of sky. But there's a lot of good examples on YouTube of drone shows. I think it's Stranger Things Metallica.
Nice.
It's a super cool little presentation, but it'd give you a good idea of what's out there and what these drone shows are capable of.
Okay, well, I'm just watching the Parker one and I'm struck by the fact that it is slowly moving. And I don't know, it's cool, but its pace is kind
Well,
of slow.
and I mean, it is flying objects. I mean, it's little drones this size with lights on them, and they have to be maneuvered around.
It's fascinating. Could we do a drone show at the State of the City?
If you guys want to.
That's what I was thinking, is something like that.
And it is
And then
more
just
economical
try
to
it
do it
out.
on a non-4th of July
Right.
night.
Right.
So yes, absolutely. We could do a laser show there too.
So sorry.
No,
Councilmember Long?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of another show, just at a lesser price. If you can get a quote on that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm watching the screen here. He's showing me several screens here. This is pretty impressive, actually.
Cool. In favor of another show.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Yeah?
Yes,
Woo.
yes, I agree.
Let's do two.
That's awesome.
Jason's like, oh, no. Look at him.
He's like,
You want to weigh in with your new hat? If we ask you, will you weigh in? No? Could we get a smaller drone show?
You know, I mean, I would just get bids, I mean, for a drone show on the night of the State of the City and let you guys know what the options are. But I think 100 is too small. I think you need to at least go 150, was kind of the feeling that I got, unless, and I'm a little worried about 4th of July because we have so many people that like come across the street, right? So, but for State of the City, we could put him based out of the old rec center, and people would just all face that direction, because there's only people in the festival lawn that are watching it, right? So yeah, I don't know, we definitely, can we add a drone show to a different event? The answer is absolutely. We probably have to come back for a budget, but if that's what you guys wanted, happy to look at that and do that. So back to 4th of July direction there.
So is it, I think, it looks like it might be fireworks, but are they set to music in some way?
Yes, they are set to music. We actually pay quite a bit of money for speakers to be spread out throughout the park so that people can hear the fireworks to the music. I do want to point out that more impressive fireworks are a little bit difficult in our site because we don't have big open space. They have to be what's called proximate fireworks. So proximate fireworks actually are more expensive, number one, and part of what proximate means is they're not going to shoot up in the air super high so we don't burn down anybody's house is kind of, or the hospital, would that be bad? You know? So there was a time when they used traditional fireworks at the site, but there was no SEL, there was no new rec center, you know, it was a pretty big open space. So that space is now all gone, so we do proximate fireworks. And the price did increase significantly when they switched to those. As I look back at the cost, is that accurate, Jason? Is that what you remember as well? Yeah, so proximate is more expensive, and I think one of the reasons that they did it on the lake is to kind of make it more exciting, but that also makes it more risky for failure. So per your direction and Heather's direction, we did the RFP as if it's launching from land. And I did get assurances from the fire department that that is not an issue if they're proximate fireworks. They just need, you know, certain, not very much clearance really, since they're proximate fireworks, so we'd be good there.
So where is our spot to put the drones?
It would be where they set up in the past, but they wouldn't be putting stuff on barges. They would actually be setting up the fireworks right there on that bank. So other than that side, right where their trucks used to be, everybody else would still be able to see them. But they wouldn't be over the lake. They would be off of land.
I was looking. Councilmember Kondo, I pulled up the Balloon Festival one that you were referring to. That one's pretty cool.
Yes, ma'am. You know, and that's the nice part about it is you can program it, you can have messages, you can say things, and it's environmental friendly, which seems to be consistent with the sustainability discussion that we had earlier this evening. And less likely to have any kind of fire concerns and things of that nature. So from a safety perspective, I think it's a pretty strong argument.
Okay. Anybody else wanna, what do you wanna do for the 4th of July? Councilmember Walker?
Fireworks.
Fireworks.
I think we kind of have to do that.
At least one.
Fireworks.
Yep, fireworks.
Okay.
Fourth.
Fireworks. Let's see if
And
we can
the
do
next question
drone.
is, we had talked about something expanded, but if you're gonna do a drone show at State of the City, can't we be like, hey, fireworks is 13 minutes, but hey, we're having a drone show too, come to this event. Do you wanna leave it at that, or do you want me to see if they'll make the show longer?
I think,
Okay, so 13-minute fireworks for July 4th and get some pricing for drones for State of the City. Is that all correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless we can do it for work.
Well, and
drone shows for everyone.
I think this was clear in my email, but in case you didn't read my email, you know, it is all hands on deck for State of the City. So
It
all
is.
the
Everyone has
boards,
to come.
commissions, you know, our foundations, we want a good presence to show all the great things that our city are doing. So just want to make sure everybody's on board and excited for that, because I honestly feel like this big stage with a fun band, and it's, you know, there's booths all the way around of all the stuff that the city does. We don't have events that showcase us. We are showcasing other things and themes, so I think it should be pretty cool.
Can I ask a couple questions about the previous parts of the presentation? So you had mentioned the cost of the coupons.
Yes.
And then when I looked at the flyer, it says the coupons are $5 off. But there was another thing that said something like one sweet or one, I was just confused. And then I wondered if the cost wasn't that big of a deal, could we cover more than $5?
I think we're better off giving $5 to everybody in a family than we are to be giving multiple coupons to one person. But that's just my take on it.
Okay.
We do we have a minimum for our food trucks, as I explained to you last year. But our coupons count towards that minimum, right? And that's one of the reasons why let's reduce the number of food trucks, especially if we're encouraging people to bring picnics, which was some of the direction from you guys. So if the food trucks aren't gonna make that much money, you might, I mean, it'll be us writing a really big check if we're encouraging people to bring picnics. Do you see what I'm saying? So I was trying to balance out our return on investment, but I do like, as we progress through the summer, giving people more coupons so that, you know, it wasn't just $5 off for our family, it was $5 off for each of us. But that is totally up to you. If you want to up that coupon cost, it just has budget impact, right?
Well, and I was wondering, because the last, I think it was the mayor's event in July, or maybe it was
Well, and at this event, we've specified we're doing free food, but I mean, it'll be hot dogs and chips, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not gonna be, you know.
No, maybe it
Potatoes,
was
fully
it was
loaded.
the other
National
event.
Night Out.
National Night Out. Because I spent $40 on 2 meals.
You are absolutely right.
And so that was a lot of money, and that was a concern I had, so I don't
Right.
know. Was it the food trucks that we selected, or the prices just now that high?
Just the prices. Yeah, no, I don't think that's unusual. Yes, I think the prices are high. I've spent the, you know, if I'm gonna just buy stuff for me, it's $20. But, you know, I definitely think it has an impact on families, which is one of the reasons why we're encouraging the picnic aspect,
Okay.
was because of that feedback and reducing the number of food trucks and hoping that, you know, they have a price point where you actually get one item for your value of your coupon. So whether that's an ice cream or churros or whatever. So that's kind of why we went that direction. We can totally add, you know, give people multiple coupons if you'd like or whatever, but obviously it all has a budget impact.
Well, I wondered about something less expensive, like ice cream or like even a Kona ice.
Right.
If they could get that, but I know it.
And that's what we try to do at the food. We have a savory and a sweet. It would be nice if we had food trucks that would kind of offer both, but there aren't a lot out there in all honesty. They kind of specialize.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, so we'll have an ice cream or some kind of sweet vendor at all of them that usually have something at a $5 price point, and then it's the food that's truly expensive, so.
I don't know, desserts get expensive too.
True.
It was closer to 10, so I'm.
Well, and maybe we need to have, well, and I guess my question is, do you want to up the price of the coupons, or do you want us to tell the food trucks, we want you to have at least an item at a $5 price point, and they'll adjust accordingly? You know, I think that we can say that since we guarantee them a minimum and we're using coupon, so.
I don't know. What do you guys think? It hit me pretty hard. So I was like, yikes.
Yeah, it is very pricey.
Wouldn't it be a
That people
picnic
wait
girl?
2 hours in line at Food Truck Carnival to spend that kind of money, like, blows my mind, but
Yeah.
they do.
Thoughts on coupons, anyone?
How many did you say? I mean,
I put it back up here.
Yeah, okay.
So as you can see, we gradually increased. The festival lawn was the mayor's where we gave out the most, 75, because that's a citywide event. The other ones were award. Huron, I wasn't at the Huron one, so I don't know what happened there, but anyway. The rest, I think the Ward 4 one, which tends to have more attendance, honestly, I think we just gave out more coupons freely there as the summer progressed, yes.
Yeah.
So for Ward 4, the ice cream truck that was there, that's
Did
why
great.
I think
Yep.
so many coupons went. That was the best ice cream I've
Oh,
ever
yeah,
had.
it's
I'm
great.
just going to say, that was excellent, and that really worked well. And I think it was pretty close to the coupon price, if I remember. It
Yeah.
was maybe
It was
like
$5
six-
for
Yeah,
ice
like
cream.
it was the exact amount, so that was nice.
And if you wanted to get bigger, better things, you could, but yeah, you could get like their basic ice cream in multiple flavors for the coupon price.
Councilmember Goff.
I guess I would suggest maybe raising the coupon $7. Just make it a little bit, because yeah, I mean, I think certain type of person just expects food to be expensive, but not everybody gets that, and then they're just. And I would say maybe the Huron Crossing Park thing, I don't remember what the weather was like, but there are a lot of people in the whole of Ward 3 have no idea or where it is.
Right.
So-
It caught me by surprise because we had run things there at
Yeah.
COVID that did so well. You worked that table in hand.
Yeah, but I think the neighborhood people
yeah.
just walked over for that. For this, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I don't think we'll have that problem at EB Range, to be perfectly blunt.
No.
Just passerbys will be plenty of people. And our hope is to do it on the east side of the park where we can talk about the new building that's going on in there, highlight, and be closer to the residential area. So
Sounds good.
We'll still have to sign it really well, but mostly if people see food in a band, they'll wander over. That's my thought, but who knows? Everything's always an evolution, right? You do it and you evaluate it and you get your feedback and try to tweak it the next year to give people what they're looking for and do what's right for your community.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll add, for the Ward 3, it was good weather. But I felt like it was too early, late afternoon, if you will, that, you didn't get a lot of adults coming just because perhaps people were still at work or on their way home. And finally, Huron Crossing, beautiful park that it is, but it's kind of ensconced in a kind of a secluded area. So it's kind of hard to just kind of be visible and a lot of attraction factor. We did have North Metro Fire send a ladder truck, and you may want to consider doing that, planning in advance, because everybody likes firefighters, especially kids. So, and then my last comment was I might have been pretty chintzy on handing the coupons if you look at the numbers. So, yeah, just either increase the value of the coupon or, having consistent policies as to how we hand them out would be nice.
Okay, so invite North Metro.
And it looked like the June 5th groundbreaking. Is that a sizable event?
Well, initially when we came up with the idea, I thought it was going to be a sizable event, but after feedback from you and others, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a sizable event, which is why we're handling it in-house. Because originally I thought we'd bring in a contractor just because of the timing, because we have so many other big events right around them that it's a lot when you got food truck and then you've got Pride coming up right then. So, but now my take on it so far is that really it's going to be council. We'll invite a few dignitaries. It's a little bit more ceremonial, and not that you wouldn't, if you guys want to have food or speeches or whatever, but it doesn't sound like a bunch of tables and a tent and a band at this point, since it is one of your meeting nights. So if that changes, we'll definitely look at expanding that and bringing in some support, but it's at your discretion, to be honest with you.
Okay, I guess that was my impression. When did we give feedback that changed it?
That it's a big deal or it's not a big deal? Can I clarify?
I thought it was going to be a bigger event. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
recall. So
I can
this-
help clarify,
That would
sure.
be
So
great.
originally, the scope that staff had come up with was to have it be a bigger deal. And then we started hearing feedback about the scope related to the timing. And so I went ahead and told staff, go ahead and scale it back, so that way we could time the event before a council meeting. Because we were originally scheduling the event on a separate weekday night. And so you and I had a discussion, I think I heard from a couple other council members. Well, this is the groundbreaking, not the actual opening. So we're gonna shift energy into a bigger event for the opening and keep this, as Diana described, more ceremonial. So that way we can still special and nice, but more ceremonial. And that way we can have it at the end of the workday pre-council meeting on that June 5th date. And that's all doable in-house without hiring a contractor to provide Diana and her staff support.
Okay, so that was the piece I missed, the change in date, because when it was on the other date, I had a bigger thing in mind. So we put it on a Monday, and we're gonna do it before a council meeting.
Yes, we'll probably start the council meeting a little bit later. We don't have that nailed down specifically yet, but so that way we can have a start time towards 5:30, and then start the meeting maybe by 6:30.
Okay, I think I got confused, because it was on
Yeah.
a schedule with big events, and it's the smallest one.
And when I sent that one out,
Yeah.
I did think it was a big event, but yeah,
I was
things
like,
change,
okay.
right?
Little, okay. Any other questions or comments from council?
So I just want to clarify, so we're fireworks, same vendor as the past, 13-minute show, everybody's good with that. Add drones to State of the City, I'll go and get some quotes for that, and we'll probably come back for a budget supplemental. Raise the coupons for the 4 neighborhood events to $7. We don't need that at State of the City because we were planning on complimentary food. And standardize, I think we'll just say 1 coupon per person just from the get-go, so that'll make a change there. And invite the fire department to our 5 neighborhood night events, the center of which is a pretty big deal. Even though they're not city, I guess we'll let them come. All right.
Okay.
Let's see, I think I have a final slide and we're done. unless you had more questions and I missed something.
Don't see it.
I probably don't need the final slide. I probably know what I'm going to say, but just in case, I don't want to miss anything, so I'm going to go to the final slide. Maybe. I'm just going to look. You know, in general, I guess I just want to say our attendance at events is really good. They have the events in North Glen are impressive compared to other municipalities I've been to, and they are successful, and the community likes them. So if you wonder why you do this, that is why. And I have not seen an event yet that did not pull a decent amount of people when it's been established, when it's been well promoted, and they've all been executed very well. I know we have a new team this year, but we did a Clifton Strengths, and our biggest chunk was all execution. That's where people have a lot of skill. So I'm like, well, that makes sense. So just wanted to say events are successful and appreciated in our community. We're always evolving to improve our level of service and best utilize our resources, and we're really excited about 2023.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our final item tonight, Civic Center Phase 3. Come on up. Director of Planning and Development, walking down the aisle. What do you got?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Okay, before I jump into the PowerPoint presentation, normally I like to try to roll through our presentations when it comes to planning presentations. Tonight I want to make sure that I pace appropriately and want to point out that if council members have questions about the whys, the whats, the hows, as we go through this, please feel free to stop and interrupt.
Okay.
The idea here is that there is a lot to digest. There are a lot of moving parts. There is no single best answer to what I'm about to present tonight. The other thing I want to share with you is the mindset that staff brought forward tonight was managing council expectations against fiscal constraints. I will say that in general, money solves all problems. And also, when you think about the conversation tonight, it's, I think, as much a question of time versus money. And so what we tried to do with this information we're sharing with you in our recommendation is thread that needle. Now, the question is, does that meet council expectations, as well as understanding the aspects and the implications to the information we're going to share. So just wanted to prime that with this conversation.
Can I ask you a question? Because it is kind of hard to interrupt you. Are there pause points in here?
Yep, I'm going to
Okay.
go slow. And
Perfect. So, council,
normally I
I,
will roll through things if I feel like council has a strong consensus. This is
Right.
not that conversation tonight.
Perfect.
This is
Okay.
the ideas, the slides are hopefully going to provoke questions and have a discussion rather than purely informational. So
great. So I'm just going to remind council, though, to raise your blue hand, because that's what I'm looking for. Do you know how to do that? I can also try to keep looking. You're just so far over there, and I'm looking here. So if I miss you, raise it up.
And you can also throw things at me too to stop me from talking, so I do my
Don't do
best.
that.
Don't encourage that.
I know, I'm like, we're trying to practice
right.
here.
Okay. So here we are to provide an update on Phase 3. And we added a few slides here tonight and that we did not have in here, and I want to apologize. This is for the new council members, Councilmember Long and Kondo. We've been working on this for the last 6 to 9 months, so our familiarity on a staff level in the previous communications we've had with council didn't take that into account. So the first couple slides here is really just to kind of orient you to the overall area. So one of the things here is that we're going to primarily be talking about this area that says North Glen Old Rec Center. That's the Phase 3 area that is the focus of discussion. We have some better pictures of representations here coming.
Here, I'll get it, Brooke.
Thank you. So we have some renderings of the concept plan that council approved last year with Continuum Partners as part of the overall development for the site. This is, again, is the old rec center area that I'm highlighting here. Rich is the north side of the property. We had talked about a mixed-use development where we had multifamily, townhome, and commercial. We had a commercial pad site right here on the north side of the memorial to sort of anchor that. The idea here, and we also had a little commercial here. This commercial development was primarily intended to be neighborhood-serving commercial. So this was supposed to be sort of that Main Street effect, not necessarily franchise, AAA credit type users. At the time, we were looking at potential having like a distillery or a craft brewery go into that space and sort of do a mini Stanley Market or something to that effect was the overarching theme for that commercial area. But once again, more neighborhood serving commercial. The other thing that we had identified, which we won't talk much about tonight, is there's a parking lot here that was intended to be excess parking for City Hall and overflow parking for the rec center for future programming and events. The other component here is we did have this wrapped with townhomes around that would be self-parked, i.e. they would provide all of their off-street parking within the space of their lot, not relying upon this other area. And for Councilmember Long Condo, we had a long conversations with council about, well, how do you manage that? And what does it look like? And are you gonna put covenants in? All of those types of things would be worked through if we were to move forward with this programming with a future developer and ensuring that we put the measures in that this is actually utilized in a manner that would make sense for us to move forward.
Working?
Hey, it worked. All right. This is just another view of it from a different direction here. Just want to share that. And the other thing I want to point out, this is just a placeholder element of the City Hall. It's not our current program City Hall, but just in case people ask. Okay. So initially we had a phase 1 environmental report that said, hey, you've got some hot soil on the north half of the property. We do not have that on the south side of the property where we're currently constructing City Hall. We also had the same test identify that this area is clean. If there's questions as to why is that, I'm happy to go into it. We then were required by the state in terms of doing our cleanup to do additional testing. And that additional testing identified a new cost estimate because of substantial contamination as a result of more detailed testing of about $5 to $5.4 million. This is far beyond anything that we would have anticipated. There's a lot of moving factors to that. I will say that it's the volume, and it's also the most conservative approach to remediating the site. The other thing that also drove this, which is when we talked about Civic Camp or City Hall and 120th project, we had 25% increase in costs on both of those project estimates. Here, the main driver is diesel. When you do remediation, you're taking dirt off and you're bringing dirt on, and about 80–90% of that cost for that price per yard is driven by fuel costs. One of the things that we did not do as part of this exercise because of the Suncor refinery challenges that happened during the cold snap is our current gas prices are still elevated. And so going back out to market, we likely would have gotten the same pricing. It's likely that those numbers could come down in the future, assuming that prices start to moderate. So that is a huge variable in this conversation that we just don't have any understanding right now that it's any different than when we did these estimates back then. So with that, we went and talked to CDPH&E, and I will refer to a gentleman named Fonda, and I will not even attempt to pronounce his last name. He's been with CDPH&E for over 25 years. He is literally considered probably one of the quintessential expert resources in how do you manage soil remediation in the state of Colorado. We sat down with him, and he came up with a revised game plan based on the initial analysis that could effectively reduce the cost in half. And it's about $2.6 million is what we were looking at. Now, I will go into more detail as to what that looks like and what that means and why is it so much cheaper. But for this purposes of this slide, that is where we are at with the soil remediation. Now, the demo of the rec center is also another interesting component here. The initial estimate that we have is about $450,000. We also had an environmental report for abatement. Now, when you do a demo of a commercial building, the state requires an asbestos report, basically an environmental report. We had a report, and it basically said the building was clean. However, it was outdated, and the state Health Department now has a shelf life for environmental testing reports for demo of buildings. We went out and did a new test, and it showed that we had the potential for a hotspot. Our consultant recommended that we do additional testing, and sure enough, it was hot. Well, the way that the state regulates internal materials is that if that material is hot in that location, and even if it doesn't test positive anywhere else in the building, wherever that material exists inside the building is now treated as hot. That dramatically increased the impact to the original estimate to the order of about tenfold with this. So right now we have a current estimate of $2 million, and if you notice in the staff report, we have a couple of ranges of pricings for demo and remediation in here. This number here is the demo and remediation. We believe it's approximately around $2 million. I'm going to stop there.
Councilmember Kondo.
Yeah, I'm not a environmental expert, but I was just thinking that when you have lead poisoning, you have chelating agents like EDTA to treat patients that have ingested lead. Are there chelating agents, sort of methodologies or processes that are in civic engineering to be able to render lead in soil inert or transform it to a safer sort of element?
The answer
because, scraping 8 feet of soil, that's a large volume of earth to move.
The answer is yes, and I will come back to that a little bit later because that's part of the methodology that we're employing with the CDPHE approach.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
But yes, that was one of the fundamentals that we looked at, and the reason why there is a range of the 5 to 5.4 million.
Okay.
And just for the rest of council, what Councilmember Kondo is talking about is in the staff report, we have 2 contaminants. We have arsenic and lead. Lead is very bad, and you have to take it out. With arsenic, we can actually do different mitigation measures to it, but we have to take the lead out. There are different means and methods on how you can take lead out. If you take it out in its current condition, you pay a higher premium to take it to a repository because it's basically not deemed inert. What Councilmember Kondo is talking about is that you can mix additional chemicals with that lead that reduces its toxicity, that a different repository will accept it at a lower price per cubic yard. So that's a value engineering exercise that we went through with CDPH&E and trying to understand how we can better cost manage this. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, so kind of jumped a little ahead here, but I'll talk a little bit about this. So the current scope of work that we have for the $5.4 million assumes an excavation or removal of soil, of all contaminated soils of arsenic and lead, and an excavation of 8+ feet and an import of 8+ feet across the entire site. It's about 46,000 cubic yards of material that we would be taking out and putting back in. What this does is it gives you no deed restrictions and no environmental covenants. And I want to just on this bullet, because this is going to be part of the ongoing conversation when we talk about CDPH&E's approach, is no environmental covenants with CDPH&E approach, but deed restrictions. And I'll help, when we get to that part of the presentation, I'll share a little bit more detail as to what that means and what's its implications for redevelopment. So the CDPH&E approach talks about only removing 4 feet of material of arsenic and then removing all of the hot spots of lead. So all the lead goes out regardless in this conversation, but just 4 feet of over excavation and 4 feet of import of fill. What this does is that it creates a deed restriction that you cannot disturb the soil 4 feet below. Now, there is an exception to that, and that's foundations. You can build your foundation in the contaminated soil, but you cannot expose that contaminated soil to the public in a residential setting. It has to have a 4-foot cap in order for it to be deemed non-epidemiologically unsafe for the public. So you can build a foundation for a new building in that soil, but you can't have that soil below that 4 feet exposed to the public. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a 4-foot do not disturb on the soil. And then this approach with CDPHE would be safe for redevelopment. But you're going to have a deed restriction on there saying that this is what happens.
Can I ask a question? So I'm still trying to picture this. I think I understand what you're saying, but does that mean that these, whatever was built there, cannot have basements? Or
They can have basements.
but they have to do something with the soil they're displaced?
That's correct. So one of the things that we talked about on the site plan with the townhomes against Festival Lawn is that the foundation of those townhomes would actually serve as a retaining wall for fill material, so that even though their foundations would be in the toe of the slope, if that slope is below that 4 feet cap, it would not be a violation under the approach that CDPHE has proposed. All right. As I alluded to earlier, the early testing showed no contamination. We were required to do a new report. We also went out, and one of the things that we had with our original proposal with FCI is they were to do the demo. However, under their insurance carrier, they cannot do abatement, and that's because of the additional costs and liability. So we had done a 2-bid process, a bid for abatement, which we thought was very insubstantial, turned out to be more substantial, and then have FCI be the demo contractor. Well, when we actually went out and did this bid, we said, hey, there might be some cost savings if we just had one person do it as opposed to 2. Turns out it was insubstantial. That's not to say that it still couldn't be less, but based on how on the research that we did up to this point, and reaching out to some of the vendors who did bid on the abatement and asked them if, because they do both, to see if we could get better pricing, their pricing was essentially the same. So it wasn't a huge cost savings with that. So before I talk about this, any questions about the demo of the rec center? Okay. So redevelopment of the site, timing for re-engaging a private development partner. We have a couple tables we're going to share here in a minute, but basically the EPA grant process is such that it takes about a year to get the grant to be able to start to do the work. The work itself for remediation is probably a 3 to 4 month window for each project. But one of the things that we were looking at when we were thinking about this is, and while we provided context for the new council members about what we have for the programming, by the time that we would get to a point where we would want to engage a developer and be market ready, that market report is really only good for 6 to 9 months. And so when we originally did the master plan, and part of the reason why we looked at the reimagining of the old rec center was because that report was somewhat old and whether or not the market would support it. Now, for those who may have had a sleepless night and decided to read the master plan, it showed that we wanted to do a hotel. Well, literally the month that we had finished that plan, we had 2 hotel flags who were ready to build executive suite hotel. Well, they all got built somewhere else in the intervening time, so that was no longer market ready. So it's just a case in point example of not getting too ahead of ourselves with this conversation that we had originally brought forward to council at the end of last year of let's go out and do our own infrastructure analysis. Let's go out and figure out what the highest and best use is and what we can do, what's the market support. So one of the things that I want to try to put in context in terms of council expectation is that we don't try to do that step too soon because it could be a lost effort in terms of its actual effectiveness to deliver on what it says. So with that being said, the vision that we have now, we would go out and retest because that's what the council consensus was. But I just want to premise that it's very likely that it could change. It could change for the better. We could see mid-rise housing options that would be much different than what we saw in this, which could reduce footprint, reduce infrastructure, and also potentially open it up for different type of commercial. Commercial may have a different demand when we get to that point in the timeline. So I just want to preface that in terms of managing expectation and why we're putting this in the presentation, because it's really strategic. And I would also suggest that when we were working with Continuum, and it's do we stay with them, do we keep, or do we break loose? This was a huge factor because they had in their mind a financial development plan that made sense, and if we ended, we knew there was going to be a gap, and then we were going to have, absent this issue with the remediation, that we would have to go out and redo this exercise. And so it's, do you lose the momentum and the time and have to recalibrate expectations? Okay, so this chart's a little hard for me to read at this distance because it's in small font, but we'll do the best. You guys can take a look at it on your.
Do you want this, Brooke?
I've got mine right here. Okay, so what we did here is we identified basically the tasks that I've been just covering so far. And what we tried to show you here is the original estimates, the updated costs, and how, and on a timeline, when these costs would be deployed. And so a couple things is that the demo of the old rec center, we're proposing to do that this year. And as I mentioned in the staff report, the idea is we take it out to bid in March, April, but we wouldn't issue a notice to proceed until the fall. Now, the reason for that is all of these abatement demo companies, they go out and do all the schools in the summer. And so you pay a premium for them to go out and do it at that time. They're very, very hungry come September because they're not doing these bigger projects. So there's a value added opportunity for cost savings with that approach. So we have the site remediation, and in this scenario that I'm presenting to you is intended to represent a budget balanced approach based on the available funding that we have of $2.7 million. And that's just, and I'll go through some of those assumptions, but essentially what we would do is we would apply for a $1.5 to $2 million grant for the first grant cycle. And you're saying, well, Brooke, why don't you have $2 million on there? Well, because we want to do the remediation of the rec center site before we do the remediation of the parking lot, so we can continue to utilize the parking lot. We don't know at this point the actual cost allocation of, well, how much does the rec center portion of the remediation cost versus the parking lot remediation, because we have to take that next step with the VCUP application. With that being said, with a $1.5 million grant, we also have the opportunity to capitalize on that tax credit of $500,000. And so that tax credit can go towards that. We have to have that tax credit, or we have to have the remediation contemplated for that tax credit completed by the end of 2024. So, as I mentioned, we would apply for a grant this fall. We would likely get it under contract in August or September of next year. And the idea is we would be done by December 31 of 2024 to take advantage of that tax credit. So once again, these are all aspects to how we fund and balance the current budget under this current timeline. And then, of course, we've also had programmed here site landscape remediation. So when we originally contemplated this project, we had anticipated that there was going to be a hole where the rec center was, and we were going to leave it as a hole. Well, now we don't know what we're doing with the rec center, the old rec center site, so we're going to have to bring in fill, and then obviously we want to revegetate it so it doesn't look like it's just an empty dirt lot. This is not a park landscape plan. This is a vegetation plan to stabilize soil. So I don't want to give anyone the idea that this is going to be an elaborate design. It's going to be something that's going to, keep the site stable and not have dust control issues. So once again, I'll take it into the calculus here of trying to understand how do we manage the budget. And then, so that would be in 2024, and then in 2025, we would be looking at phase 2 of site remediation, and also we would be looking at the market feasibility study option of going out back to the market to re-engage a private developer and doing that analysis. And then finally, we have demo of City Hall on here, and that's essentially in sync with the fall of '24 is when we would actually move into the new building, and then we would initiate the demo. Now, one thing I want to mention on the existing City Hall, it was built a number of years later. We have some environmental testing reports that suggest that there is no contamination in the building now to be concerned of from a demolition standpoint. However, we're going to most likely have to do another test, and that test could, as we did here, have more implications. Right now, what we're estimating is the demo of City Hall is $750,000. So with that, one of the things that we're also recommending with this budget approach is to hold off on installing the traffic signal and using that source of revenue or that source of the budget to help cover this exercise and this effort. When we look at the impacts of where we are today, we effectively don't have any increased travel demand that we didn't already have before because we just moved the rec center on the site. Just as we're just moving the City Hall on the site, we're not necessarily generating enough substantial traffic to warrant a signal. The signal was really intended to reflect the impacts of the development on the north side based on the amount of trip generation that residential and commercial would bring. I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions. Okay. I appreciate you all indulging me here because I am talking a lot. I'm trying to make sure that all of this is sort of sinking in as best I can. The other thing I just want to touch on the brownfields grants. These are no local match, which is great. Application is in the fall, the award's in the spring, and the contract is in the early summer. There are currently they've already had this year or 2022-3 is the first grant. They are programmed to have at least 3 to 4 more of these grant cycles. This is under IIJA, the Infrastructure Act. Historically, brownfields grants require a 20 to 30% local match. These are and EPA. We would be very, very competitive because of the programming and because it's community-owned property and its revitalization. All of the social environmental justice issues are high on the score here for us, so we would be extremely competitive and well-positioned. No guarantees, but once again, this project is well-suited for this type of program, and we think we would be very competitive based on the feedback that we got. And as I said before, 2 years essentially to complete one grant is that timing. Okay, the other thing that I mentioned earlier is this tax credit. Once again, I won't belabor that because I've already touched on that. Any questions on that? All right, so this slide here kind of talks about the sources and uses of the fund and where we would appropriate it. So the idea is that we have 2.7 of the current budget and then 2.6 for the brownfield grant. And keep in mind that number could go up to 3 million. It's all variable. And then $500,000 for the tax credit. And so basically we would basically be net 21K under these assumptions. The other thing I want to mention is that these estimates do not take into account inflation. I will tell you that we are working with Cumming. I get commodity reports every 2.5 to 3 weeks, and we are watching the trends for everything from lumber, steel, gas, everything to try to understand where we are and what that trend looks like. Right now, because of we're kind of in a slightly inflated area for gas, but we think it's going to come down here as we get toward the summer. Any questions? All right. We covered this. We talked about the demo of the rec center and the timing. And as I mentioned, the why wait for fall is because we think we can get better pricing with those contractors that do this type work because they're not doing the public schools. So this is just another different table that kind of shows you, instead of from a financial perspective, the actual integrated steps and what they look like and why they're layered out for that. So the one thing I will say is that we currently have a $2.6 million budget. If we were to appropriate additional funds, we could try to do a brownfield grant in 1 year and basically go for a $2 million grant, and the city would bring up the delta with that, but we would need to bring additional funds. What that would do is it'd move everything up on the scale probably by about 18 months for timing. So our recommendation is to proceed with the demo of the rec center, go the 2 brownfield grant route, and then defer the market feasibility study between 2 and 3 years. And one of the things the reason why we put this range in here is because we want to know that we have a degree of certainty of how the brownfields are going to go. If we get the first grant, in my career experience, you're almost guaranteed to get the second because you're already competitive and you're performing and you're demonstrating. We are so far along in our feasibility efforts that all of that just lends itself to being very, very competitive for this. And so that in that 2 to 3 year period is when we would look at re-engaging a P3 partner. And that is the presentation. And I'm happy to help answer any questions. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in. That doesn't mean I don't have to go last. I just wanted to start by saying that I really appreciate the clarity. That was so clear and so easy to follow, not just for us, but for any residents that are really, interested in the process here. The cost savings approach I also appreciate. It is painful to delay, but it makes sense. And so you really made that clear. And I think we all know that the demo is super important, so starting with that, I fully support. I couldn't help, just because of our evening, this is not a question, this is not a box I want to open, but it does make me think about events in the future because we use this space. And so just wondering, you don't have to answer that, but it's just in my brain, like what does that do to events and how do we navigate around?
So one of the things that to start to answer that question, one of the things that we are doing right now, we had a meeting last week with Diana and her team about what does 2023 look like, and how much time, in coordination with the breaking ground of the new city hall, how do we accommodate staging and parking and all that stuff. We've presented to the leadership team also last week what that looks like. We got some feedback from them. We're going to reach out and share that with the rest of the staff. And then as we finalize this, we did that and we're finalizing that feedback. But we also had this breakout meeting with Diana to talk about this year specifically. This is another thing that we're going to need to figure out is when we talk about finished grading, one of the things we talked about for the parking lot area, do we finish it in a different than just a revegetative approach to where maybe we have it to where it can be used for overflow parking, maybe it can have some type of temporary special event use other than parking, but we're just not quite there yet to be able to give you a clear picture of what that looks like. Okay. But it is clearly on our radar, and it's very important because we recognize the importance of the special events for council, and so we want to make sure that we are taking that into account. We just don't know what exactly it looks like. It's likely going to be some type of utilization in some capacity.
Okay. Councilmember Long, did you have your hand?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you. I have several questions. A little history on me. I was with NURA about 7 years. In the last few years in NURA, when we were clearing and gathering up all the acreage we could for 120th and Grant, we always had a vision of possibly building a town center on that site. So that was one of the options we looked at. I was in the minority for the final vote when they developed it because we needed sales tax, so we went with what we have now. But now that I see this vision, I'm sorry to say, not sorry, but my mind now goes to this town center concept again. And I'm looking at these elevations thinking, well, possibly there might be something there we could look at. Now, another confession I'll make is, in another life, I'm a developer in healthcare, hospitals, those kinds of flats. How many acres are we talking here?
Just over 10 acres.
10 acres. City Hall included and
No,
rec center?
Just the north half.
What if you put both of them together? How many acres are you talking?
The overall site, including the new rec, is 22 acres. The south area where we have the current, basically where we are sitting with that area is about 4 acres.
Okay.
Where we are on this,
Okay.
less the new rec.
So if you aggregate all of it, you're looking at 22 acres potential.
If you take in the new rec, this location in the north half, it's about 22. If you exclude the new rec and just this and the north, it's about 14.
14, I'm not talking about the new
Okay.
rec.
Yeah.
That's already in place. I wouldn't. I'm thinking a little bit into the future here. You've got the last bullet you had was engage the private development team after the feasibility study is completed. I'm thinking possibly you might have the cart before the horse here. Sometimes you might want to engage a developer, you can find the right one in an RFP that's congenial and willing to work with you. You might work with them to develop this concept you have going forward, as opposed to you doing it with someone and then all of a sudden you find that it's not doable or whatever. So I'm just thinking through how that logic crosses when you start doing it. The other thing I would suggest, again, without telling you how to do your business, because you know better. By the way, this is a fantastic presentation, Brooke. I mean, it truly is. Summary, just as the mayor said, point, clarity, right there. A program manager early on is worth their weight in gold. I'm sure you know that. I have found that to be true wherever you are. You need an owner's rep that really has it together, that understands all the ins and outs. And if you were to go forward with a private-public financing program, which I'm assuming you might want to do, tax credits and all kinds of other things notwithstanding, I think this has the potential for putting North Glen really on the map, just speaking for myself, with finally having its own town center feeling, like downtown North Glen, if we could somehow get to that. And what all that entails, I don't know. I don't have that crystal ball, but I see this elevation here, and I'm kind of turned on with it. But I think there's more you could do, and dare I say, you can go back, gosh, what was that, 15 years ago, when we first had this town center game? I don't know if you've ever seen any of those.
I did.
Did you? Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I'm just,
If I may, I
Sure.
think what you just said, especially the last half of that, if I can say it perfectly aligns with what council has communicated and articulated, and that rendering is a reflection of this seated council's vision for what I think you just spoke to. So I would say that your feedback is, from my perspective, is aligned with the rest of the folks on this dais, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I will just say from the iterative processes we've gone through, I would tell you, everything you said I've heard been mentioned. We'll just take a moment to kind of maybe further elaborate on this market analysis. So a couple things that we have learned over the last 10 years in North Glen. Developers want to know what you're willing to approve. And so they want to have an idea of what the city's expectations are. This process, in just the last 2.5 years that we've gone to, has gone from an adaptive reuse of the old rec center with some commercial and residential to what you see in front of you today. Where I would say that part of what we want to do with this exercise is know what cards are in the deck before we sit down and talk with the developer. One of the challenges that came out of this exercise, and I will say nothing to disparage Continuum Partners, but I consider them probably one of the top, Mountain West mixed-use developers out there. They struggled mightily with this site. And when we sat down with their infrastructure analysis, it did not make sense to myself, and I've been doing this for over 25 years, that we said to ourselves, we need to understand what the real infrastructure needs are so that when we go out and negotiate value on the land itself and understanding how we establish value, we need to have our heads better wrapped around that baseline information. So really, this isn't about saying, hey, developer, go build this for us. It's, hey, we know what the capacity is for the market and also what the infrastructure needs to realize market development so that we can have an intelligent and strategic conversation with the development partner that we bring on board. I feel like what happened is that they were figuring out on the fly as we thought we had a really good baseline understanding of the infrastructure, and they weren't in sync. We want to try to make sure we hit the reset button and get that straight and get it right to begin. So to that end, I think with what you had said with the future development, when you're talking about the 11 acres and where SEL is today, we didn't have that exercise in place that I think if we do that for that property, that I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we learn from those previous efforts and make sure that we're better positioned today.
One follow-up? Yeah. Title to the land.
Yes.
The ground.
Yep.
I think is key. And the developer's gonna look for that, put it in their quiver. And if we can hold on to it, maybe a ground lease.
Yep.
Something like that, so we don't lose title to that land. I think that's a preeminent consideration. I'm sure you've thought of that, but I'm just, one more time, just putting my 2 cents in.
Appreciate that. And I will say that we did look at a 100-year ground lease, especially when we were looking at the housing typology of doing one of those approaches. I think when we start looking at those things, it's really coming down to the financing models and what sort of sources of funding that we're looking at. If we're going, with either some sort of state tax credits or other opportunities that might be out there, that's definitely one of the things we want to put into play. I will say that working with Debbie as well as everybody else on the team, with Jason and Heather, we are very much focused on being strategic when it comes to how do we handle that. I will also just mention for you and Councilmember Kondo is when we originally did this master plan, it was to demonstrate to that sitting city council that we could create a net neutral or net positive return on investment. That's pivoted a little bit. As we go through this conversation moving forward, we'll reintroduce that concept and where we sit in relationship to that, because it'll all be a component to where you're driving towards.
Yeah, the ROI.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
I do love that you're on our vibe, because we've been talking about a downtown for a while. So that's great. I don't see any other hands. Does anyone else have questions? Councilmember Kondo, how are you doing? I think this is great.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not amazing news, but it's responsible, smart news. So thank you.
So just to recap, the consensus of council is to move forward with the recommendation. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for indulging me to talk slowly and intentionally.
It made it very clear.
Thank you.
It's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke.
Okay, that was our final item.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor Lighty, I'm sorry, I had to step out at a point during the FEEP conversation, and when I stepped back in, that item had wrapped up. So I just want to clarify that staff did receive council consensus to go ahead and move forward with purchasing gas diesel vehicles that are needed to purchase now, given the constraints. Okay, thank you so much. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
I did have a question. I don't know, maybe you can tell me, Heather, because I was just looking. Are there any other items for council? I had a quick one. And I was hoping, with all of the transition, I was volunteering to just step in as the temporary liaison for CCPP so that we get it up and running. It fits into my schedule. I've already started finishing the interviews. I can do the retreat, and I just wanted to do that until the next election cycle, and then we'll go through all our, is that okay? Okay, thank you. So Joanna, I don't know if you want to make that official, you certainly.
We'll bring forward a resolution to document that.
Perfect. Okay. Anybody else have anything for council? No? Fantastic. We are adjourned.
Good night.